welcome to the show. 2 channels here, now you know. Like and subscribe, it's all we need. Alternate, you're here to speak. And defense, let's take a peek. Collaborating for your eyes. Sharing content, no surprise. Together we shine brighter than one. Join our journey, it's just begun. Like and subscribe, hit that bell. Enjoy the show and wish us well.
Good morning and good morning.
Good morning. I have to unmute.
Good morning, Indiana.
Yay.
How is you?
Yeah. I go get my
Is it
MRI today. So.
Oh, you do? That's
Yes,
great.
finally.
That's
Yes.
good.
So
Good.
I'm
Yay.
happy about
Oh,
that.
excellent. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Defence Ress, and this is Alternate Juror, and we are here today to bring you love and joy because we're amazing. Because that's what we do, isn't it?
Yes.
Apparently. Hi, Christine.
Hello, Christine.
Welcome. All right. So we had our Bercy sentencing yesterday, and Mr. Nasty got exactly what he deserved.
That got interesting.
Oh, morning, George. Hello. Good morning, Rebecca.
Hey, Becky. I'm not going to see you for a while because you keep going over to see George in the UK. She's like, what are you talking about? Her daughter lives in the UK.
Excellent.
Good morning, George.
It'll be a bit warmer over there than it is here, although it's not too bad at the moment. So yes, it did get a bit spicy last night. The sentencing, didn't it?
It did. That was very unexpected. I thought it was just going to be blah blah blah.
But
no, because
if you didn't see it, go back and watch the sentencing. It's
you can go past his family. They don't give him any breaks, but they don't really. They're just disappointed in him. But when her family speaks, that's he shows his true colors.
And it stopped the stream. We all just sat here going, literally,
like, what is happening right now? I just yep. So it was it took a little turn, which was fine. I mean,
well, it added some spice to it, didn't it?
Yeah, you don't really question now if he did it.
No.
Because that's his reputation. I mean, he showed his I can't control myself.
Correct. And if you didn't see the stream, Christopher Bercy was the defendant that unalived his girlfriend or fiance who was pregnant with his 4-month-old baby and was a mother to 2 other of his children, aged 1 and nearly 3. And unalived her in front of them, and they were left there for 16 hours until her mother found them, and the baby was holding her deceased mother's hand, and the other baby was laying in a pool of the mother's blood in the bedroom, and they had been unsupervised for that entire time. He left them there.
Yep.
So yes, he got exactly what he deserved. So
absolutely.
So today we're starting something fresh, but something old. It's like something old, something new. Something that happened or began back in 1990. So the 19th of May, 1990, this incident occurred. And it happened in St. Louis. Is that Texas?
St. Louis. So
St. Louis, sorry.
Yeah, it's weird because it's Louisville, Kentucky, but it's St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay, St.
So
Louis,
we're
Missouri.
weird
All right.
over here.
um, now, where is my little... Oh, okay, so it involves...
Hey, Tanya. Tanya. I never know if I'm saying her name right.
Oh,
Tanya.
hey, Tanya.
There,
Tanya.
I did say
Tan,
it right.
as in suntan.
Yes.
Mm. All right, so in 1990, 3 kids were sitting on the porch in St. Louis, did you say Missouri? And
Missouri.
the
Yeah.
actual porch is our backdrop today, the actual porch where the incident occurred. And just before midnight, so the 3 children sitting on the porch were Michael Davis, who was 13 at the time, Damaris Stepp, who was 14 at the time, and Rico Rogers, who was 14 at the time. Now, apparently there was a shooter who fired a quick succession of shots, and one of them fatally wounded Rico Rogers. The shooter was concealed by the darkness and never witnessed by absolutely anybody. However, Michael Davis and Damaris Steps both accused this person, Christopher Dunn, because they didn't like him at the time. They believed that he was the last person to have an argument, apparently, with the deceased, and it was over gang-related stuff, apparently, allegedly. So they both testified, or basically pointed the finger at him, and that was the only evidence at trial that they had, that the trial, like, it was based solely on those 2 testimonies. Now, Michael Davis was apparently pressured into, he didn't want to testify. He was pressured into it by the police and by Rico Rogers' mother. And the other, who was it? Damaris Stepp, he took a plea deal in return for his testimony against Dunn as well. Now, on top of all that, the plot thickens. So the trial was based solely on those 2 testimonies, and it took the jury 42 minutes to convict Dunn based on that evidence alone. So that was in July 1991, and he was sentenced then to life imprisonment plus 90 years. So that then evolved to, we go to our timeline, which I put where? Come on, I put it in a nice safe place. There we go. So the plot thickens even further. So in 2005, Damaris Stepp, I can't even read my own writing, Jodie, recanted his testimony in an affidavit. Yeah. So what's that? 15 years later, Damaris recanted his testimony in a sworn affidavit. Then in 2017, he was interviewed by the Attorney General, where he then said that his 2005 affidavit was all lies. Then the following year, when it was the, I don't know if I say this properly, it's the habeas corpus.
Oh,
Habeas
habeas
corpus.
corpus. Habeas
Okay,
habeas corpus.
there you go. They had that hearing where he then denied saying anything to the Attorney General and reaffirmed his 2005 recantation about the defendant not being seen or witnessed. So, and in 2015, Michael Davis also recanted his testimony in a sworn affidavit, and in 2017 reaffirmed that in an interview. So, the 2 main witnesses for this conviction basically both recanted their testimonies. And it was put to, I think it went back to a grand jury, or it was put back to another judge. I've forgotten his name. Hang on. Another judge reviewed the case, and where is it? Come on. I've been sitting here reading this for the last 2 hours. I should know it off by heart. Do you know who? Hick something? Anyway, so he basically said that no jury would convict this man on these, and an appeal was launched. And then we have our
Oh, Judge
conviction
Hickel.
hearing.
Sorry.
Hickel, that's it. Yes, thank
So
you.
That was he said no jury would convict him on the evidence that was there, but because he was not sentenced to be unalived by the state, he was not allowed
Yes,
to bring this in front of the judge. So basically,
there's a
they're
law in
trying
Missouri.
to get that law changed. It's the same thing that Lamar Johnson ran into when we were listening to his hearing, that he couldn't bring it because he
hmm
was not sentenced to be unalived by the state, which is insane. If the judge is sitting there going, yeah, you're probably innocent, or at least we couldn't convict you, but sorry, they
Yeah.
didn't want to unalive you, so you can't do this.
Well, apparently he's called one of the Missouri three, which this law applies to all three of them, and he's the last one on the list because Lamar Johnson was another one on the list. Oh, hey, Udahef. Hey, Carmen. Sorry, I was reading and couldn't see chat. Sorry. Morning. Hi, Kim. Who else did I miss? Anyone? No.
Hello, Carmen and Udahef. I said hi to
And Tanya.
Kim.
Hey, Tam.
And we said, yeah.
All right. So that then brings us here. I think, did he overturn the decision and said the appeal was okay, and now we're having reconviction hearing, which is where we're at now, which is what we're covering.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
so Judge Hickel had to dismiss that because of the law.
Yes.
So then they appealed it to the U.S. Court of Appeals and to the 8th Circuit Court and petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court, and they all denied it. They all denied his petition for a new trial or to have his conviction overturned.
All right.
So then Missouri says in 2021, Missouri passed the law that said that allowed prosecutors to go to the court to request that a conviction of any type of case be vacated. So that opened the door for them again to come in front of the court and say, look at me. But we're into 2021 and he was convicted in 1991, I believe.
Yes.
So yes. So we're here, just like in the
That's where
Lamar.
we're picking up from.
Yes. So in Lamar Johnson, so this happened a couple months ago because it takes a couple months to get the judge's decision. So it's not like a year or two old, just waiting to get the judge's ruling, because that takes a while sometimes. I watched a case the other day, it took 9 months for the judge to come back with his ruling, which is insane. So the Midwest Innocent Project has gotten involved.
Yeah, they were involved, yes. Yep.
Just like they were in the Lamar Johnson hearing. So we'll see that. And then whoever the state brings to fight it, because you got to remember, in these older cases, people aren't around anymore. They've passed away.
A lot of testimony, transcript testimony through this. But I found the original 1991 prosecutor's opening statements.
Wow.
I've got them. I'll put them up. So we'll start there. Got their opening statements, their closing statements, and their rebuttal from the original trial in 91.
So the sound might be horrible, everyone, because it's from
it's transcript.
Is it?
I found the transcript.
Oh, the transcripts. Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Got it.
Yeah, I tried to find a video, but no.
I was going to say, if you found that video, you should go work for the FBI.
I found transcripts only. Sorry.
Okay.
I'll have to read them.
There was,
and I promise I'll read them in my real voice.
there was, court TV was a thing at the time that was just on TV. but they didn't cover everything,
No, I
just like
tried to
now
find,
still.
search it everywhere in archives, and I even went to the Missouri St. Louis archives there in the library and couldn't find
Yeah.
it. Anyway,
Yep. I'm surprised you found the
so
transcript, so good for you.
um, and just whilst I was doing this research and stuff, with all the stuff that's going on in all the trials that we've been watching lately with Karen Reed and the Black Swan,
Ashley.
yes,
Ashley
Ashley,
Benefield.
and all of the issues with juries and jury instructions, I found this quote, and it's based on the definition of the presumption of innocence, because I think everyone has forgotten that. The
Absolutely.
presumption, yeah, innocent until proven guilty and proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So I just thought I'd share this with you because I found it very, I don't know what you want to call it, but basically it says the presumption of innocence in this country doesn't consider whether someone is actually guilty or innocent. Instead, the presumption of innocence simply asks whether the prosecution can convince a group of people of someone's guilt at a single moment in time. That's it. So
But
there you
that's
go.
not what happens. Good morning, Regina, before you get past me here. Um,
Hey, Regina.
what happens is the media steps in, they and the state and the media run their narrative together to make somebody look a certain way. They
Mm-hmm.
don't ever they report on the arrest, but if nothing ever happens, they don't ever say, "Oh, they let that one go because they couldn't find anything on that person. They couldn't so they're moving on." You don't ever see anything like that. You just hear the arrest and you may never hear anything else
Yeah.
again until somebody else is arrested or whatever, so on and so forth. But the narrative that the media can create around
Mm-hmm.
a person can totally drive their guilt or innocence. And they don't ever push towards innocent. If they're pushing towards innocent, something's wrong
Yeah.
with the whole thing probably should never go to court if the media is not with the state pushing for guilt.
You just don't hear those words anymore. Presumption of innocence. That's
You do
very
when
rarely said.
the defense is like it's their job to prove his guilt or
Beyond
innocence.
reasonable doubt. Yeah.
Yes, he is presumed guilty until they can give you
Mm,
the evidence. But in
yeah.
people's mind, it's like, well, he's sitting here, so there's a reason. There's a reason he's sitting here.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
look
That's
at
right.
the fact that did the police get tunnel vision? Was there a thorough investigation? In this case, we don't have DNA. We don't have a lot of stuff that we have now because it didn't exist.
Yep. Yep.
So,
All right.
I don't know. I could go on and on
I
forever
just,
about
yeah,
this,
I
but
just
I
thought
won't.
it was something to throw into the mix and have a think about whilst we go through this trial. All right. Let me
I agree
bring
with
up.
you. Sorry. I agree with you, George. That will be a good one, and hopefully they will show.
Yes. I won't be able to read chat whilst I'm doing this though. Sorry. Oh, hang on. Where are we?
Bye.
Where did
behind
we go?
we're
Where do we
behind the
go?
scenes.
Where do we go? I think we're just going to have to hide for this one.
It's
I
fine.
can't get us back. I can't find us.
Oh,
All
that's
right.
good.
All right. The prosecution's opening statement. This is back in the July 1991 trial. This is how long it is. One page. Thank
Wow.
you, Your Honour. Yeah. May it please the court, Miss Good, ladies and gentlemen. Back around midnight on the 19th of May, 1990, Rico Rogers, Demaris Stepp, and Michael Davis were sitting on the front porch at 5607 Labadie something in the city of St. Louis. And whilst they were sitting on the porch talking, the defendant, Christopher Dunn, comes toward them with a gun and begins to fire shots at the three of them. Rico Rogers, Demaris Stepp, and Michael Davis begin to run, and as they begin to run, Rico Rogers falls to the ground. Demaris Stepp stops, tries to grab him, and then continues to run. The police were called, ambulance responds, Rico Rogers is taken to the hospital where he dies as a result of a pew-pew wound to the back of the head. The police respond, and Demaris and Michael identify the defendant. Mr. Dunn's lawyer, Janice Good, objected based on a prior motion. The judge and the St. Louis Circuit Court Judge Michael. Oh, that's not part of the transcript. Sorry. Should have pre-read them. Yeah, I'm confident that after you hear all the evidence in this case, that your verdicts will be guilty of unaliving in the first degree and armed criminal act, in that the defendant shot and unalived Rico Rogers, and guilty of assault in the first degree armed criminal act, in that the defendant pew-pewed at Damaris Step, and guilty of assault in the first degree and armed criminal action, in that the defendant fired shots at Michael Davis. Thank you. That was their opening statement.
Sorry, I'm trying to see what my dogs are barking at, so I'm gonna mute myself for
Okay.
just a second.
No worries. I'll keep going. So the prosecution's closing statements for this initial, there's just 3 pages of this. So for this trial, I couldn't find any of the defence stuff, but never mind. May it please the court, Miss Good, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for your time, your patience, your attentiveness, and during this trial. Whilst these, she explains the judge's explanations on jury instructions. Whilst these explanations mattered at the time, the focus of this article and this series as a whole centres on the evidence against Mr. Dunn, not the prosecution's evidence to explain the legal elements of the charged crimes in a prosecutionally friendly way. Accordingly, I have omitted this part of the closing statement. Oh, that wasn't part of it either. Now let's look at the evidence. Let's look at what the evidence shows. Back on the 19th, Rico Rogers is on the front porch. Rico Rogers gets pew-pewed in the back of the head, is taken to Barnes Hospital, and Dr. Graham tells you that he dies as a result of the pew-pew wound in the back of the head. That, ladies and gentlemen, is uncontradicted. Police officer Billings, Sergeant George, later on that same day locate the defendant, attempt to arrest him. There's a chase as the defendant runs and finally is apprehended. That, ladies and gentlemen, is uncontradicted. Then we have Damaris Step. And Damaris Step tells you that Rico is seated up here. Michael is next to him and Damaris is standing at the bottom of the steps. And they are talking, and all of a sudden the defendant comes from between the houses and he sees the pew-pew and shots fired, turns to run. They all turn to run and Rico is hit and falls. No words are said by the defendant and he continues to run. Comes back and Rico is laying there with Michael there, and Michael had also fallen near him. And Michael gets up and Rico doesn't get up and sees that he's pew-pewed in the head. Police respond, tell the police detective Sitterton what happened and IDs, and tells him Christopher Dunn did it. IDs a photograph. IDs a photograph of Christopher Dunn, and later on looks at a lineup. Thank you, Your Honour. And IDs the defendant again and says that's the man. The evidence again, ladies and gentlemen, by Damaris is uncontradicted. Then we have Michael Davis. He's also there with his friends, and he again tells you Rico is seated here by the railing. He's not next to him. Damaris is down at the bottom of the steps and they are talking. And here's a shot. They start to run. Rico falls and he sees the defendant, looks back, sees the defendant, and he falls to, so he acts like he's hit. He falls down by Rico, and next thing people are all around and he gets up, sees Rico is hit. He again talks to Detective Sydenham that night, tells him what happened and that the defendant did it, and looks at the photo and IDs the defendant. They know him. Both Damaris and Michael will tell you they know this guy from the neighbourhood. It's not like some stranger, and then who is he? And that evidence, again, ladies and gentlemen, is uncontradicted. And that's all the evidence in the case. And all the evidence is wholly uncontradicted and proves that the defendant is guilty. There is no question. There is no question that Damaris was there and was unalived by the defendant, and the defendant is therefore guilty of assault in the first degree by unaliving at Damaris, and armed criminal action in connection with that, in the use of a firearm, and fired the gun at him. There's no question that Michael Davis was there, and the defendant fired shots at Michael Davis and used a weapon used a handgun in doing that. No question, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, he is guilty of the assault and armed criminal action in connection with that. And there's no question that Rico Rogers, who was shot in the back of the head and dies as a result of the defendant. Is that murder first or is that murder second? Is there deliberation, cool reflection? And let's look, what does the evidence tell you? What does it show you? The uncontradicted evidence. Here's three kids sitting on a porch, talking and not doing anything, just sitting there talking. And all of a sudden, this man comes from around the side here, has a gun, and starts shooting. Doesn't say anything, no words are said, starts firing, and both Damaris and Michael tell you they hear 3 shots. Damaris tells you that when he sees him and sees the first, it goes over his head. They start to run. Rah, rah, rah. Dr. Graham says, well, he can't tell how far away they were fired from Rico, but it definitely is not a contact wound. So here's a man comes around the corner at the side of the house, firing shots at these 3 kids, and then runs unprovoked, no words, no nothing. That, ladies and gentlemen, is deliberation. He has a gun, comes around the corner with a gun, has no reason to attack these kids, and starts firing and continues to fire as the kids are trying to get away and strikes Rico in the back of the head. I'm confident, ladies and gentlemen, you look at the uncontradicted evidence in this case that only true and just verdict that you may reach is guilty, that the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree and armed, blah, 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 blah. All right, they say thank you. And then the verdict, ultimately, that was the prosecution's case against Christopher Dunn. According to the prosecution's versions of events, the case against Christopher Dunn remained uncontradicted throughout the trial. Nothing disputed the fact that Mr. Dunn shot at 3 children sitting on a porch without saying a word to them. In other words, to use Mr. Omer's phrasing, there is no question that this happened. Facts don't change. Facts don't change. As it turned out, the jury agreed. The jury left the courtroom to begin its deliberations at 11:05 a.m. on July 18th, 1991, and returned at 11:47, just 42 minutes later, with guilty verdicts on all charges. Mr. Dunn has been in prison ever since. There you go. We're all up to date. Oh, 11 comments. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I've been watching them. They've just
No,
they're
I can still
okay.
see all right.
They're okay.
Cool. All right. So let's get into this trial, shall we?
Yep.
And it starts opening statements. And I think it's the defense that starts.
I think so.
in this.
That's how the
Yes.
Lamar Johnson
Yeah.
hearing went because it's
Yeah.
their
I
it's
was
just
like, what?
opposite. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's opposite. They're there to prove their
Yeah.
side this time instead of the state being there to prove their side. So
Yeah.
it is strange.
All right. So we have
But
the
this is
opening
just
statement.
in front of a judge. There's no jury
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yes. All right. At the stage. And I have it boosted and I have it CC'd. So tell me if you can hear it okay.
Good, Judge.
Okay, sounds good. If there's no more informal matters, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, counsel.
Could you hear that?
It's fine for me if it's good for them. Was it
Okay,
good for
cool.
you? It's good for
It was
me.
great for me. I wonder how Versy's first night was. Sorry.
Probably a little rough.
4 years ago in
Who
Texas County, Missouri, Judge William Hickle stated that no jury would convict Christopher Dunn under the facts presented there. Based upon that evidence, as well as the recantations, Judge Hickle found it is more likely than not that a reasonably instructed jury would find Christopher Dunn not guilty. As a matter
Morning,
of law,
Bri.
Your Honor, Judge Hickle found
Ah,
that Christopher Dunn
morning.
had met the standard for actual
Morning.
innocence, as stated by the Supreme Court of Missouri in the Amrine versus Roper case. But at that time, no relief existed.
Bri, you do know that we can both see all of the comments on both sides, don't you?
Well, we can, but other people can't.
Go
So
on.
it gets them confused.
But thank you. You're so thoughtful.
for Christopher Dunn because it's a non-capital case. But now, Judge, Missouri law gives you the authority to grant the relief that Judge Hickel could not grant if you reach the same conclusions based upon the evidence presented here. The evidence presented here will inevitably lead you to reach the same conclusions as reached by Judge Hickel, establish actual innocence, and allow you to do what Judge Hickel could not do: vacate the wrongful conviction of Christopher Dunn. Over the next 2 days, you will not only hear all of the evidence that was presented to Judge Hickel, we will also present experts to you based upon scene reconstruction and with eyewitness identification, who will assist you in determining what really happened on the night of May 18th, 1990. The fact of the matter is, no one saw the shooter of Rico Rogers. Going back to that evening, Judge, just before midnight on May 18th, 1990, in pitch darkness, 3 kids sat on the porch in woods in the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood in North St. Louis. There was 12-year-old Michael Davis, 14-year-old DeMaurice Stepp, and 14-year-old Rico Rogers. 2 slightly older boys, Eugene Wilson and Marvin Tolliver, were nearby. Suddenly, a shooter, hidden in darkness, fired a quick series of gunshots. The boys turned and ran away. Michael Davis fell. DeMaurice Stepp jumped the fence. Rico Rogers was shot in the head and died. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Christopher Dunn was at his mother's house, hanging out with his family and talking on the phone. His mother, Martha, and sister Arnetta will testify that he was there with them, talking on the phone while the family was watching one of their favorite TV programs. Now, they knew that Chris wasn't supposed to be there at that time. He was supposed to be in the halfway house. So when the police came later, they lied about his whereabouts. But he was there nevertheless, Judge, and corroborating evidence will establish that. Christopher Dunn was talking originally on the phone to Catherine Jackson sometime between 10 and 11 p.m. And after their conversation ended, his good friend Nicole Bailey called. She will testify, Judge, that she had just delivered a baby girl the night before and called to talk with her friend Christopher Dunn. And they talked for hours, which was typical for them. And they were on the phone until after midnight, when the nurse made her get off the phone in order to take her vitals at about 1 o'clock a.m. A little bit later that morning, Judge, at around 3 o'clock a.m., DeMaurice Stepp and Michael Davis gave statements to the police, just a few hours after seeing their friend shot and killed. DeMaurice Stepp first said he didn't see who the shooter was, but a few minutes later, he changed course and said he saw Christopher Dunn. Michael Davis followed suit, naming Christopher Dunn as the shooter, but the boys could not agree on many of the details, as you will see, because they were making up their story as they went along. Based solely on this testimony, Judge, Christopher Dunn was tried for murder. At trial, their testimony was inconsistent, uncertain, and unsure. DeMaurice Stepp changed his story again, changing the shooter's location from one side of 5609 Labadie to the other side, and now claimed that he even saw Christopher Dunn with the gun before any shots were fired. Michael Davis, as you will see, was pressured to testify that day. There were numerous consistencies, of course, that you will hear about. You will also find that DeMaurice Stepp was facing felony charges and a potential 30-year sentence. But you will also hear from Curtis Stewart, who was in jail at the time with DeMaurice Stepp, and he heard DeMaurice Stepp admit that he never saw Christopher Dunn at the shooting. DeMaurice Stepp said he didn't care because DeMaurice Stepp was getting a deal. And indeed, the evidence will show that DeMaurice Stepp did get a deal in exchange for his testimony. The armed criminal action charge was dismissed. DeMaurice Stepp also testified that he believed that he would get probation for those charges. and ultimately he did get probation. Michael Davis did not want to testify and tried to back out, but the police showed him gruesome photos of his dead friend and put him on the phone with Rico Rogers' mother, who begged him to testify. So the youngster named Christopher Dunn. The evidence will show, Judge, that these boys never saw the shooter's face. They did not even look in that direction before the shots were fired. And after the shooting began, everything happened too fast. They were running for their lives, and they did not even look that way. All of the witnesses also have consistently agreed that it was very dark at the scene that night. These inconsistent misidentifications were the sole evidence against Christopher Dunn at trial. But since trial, both of them have recanted and disavowed that testimony. Michael Davis did so in a 2015 interview, a 2016 sworn affidavit, and a recorded 2017 interview. All of his post-trial statements remain steadfast that he never saw Christopher Dunn that night. Damaris Stepp first recanted in a 2005 affidavit, admitting that he did not see Christopher Dunn. However, in 2017, the Attorney General investigator interviewed Damaris Stepp, and he told that investigator that his 2005 recantation was a lie. But Damaris also said at that interview that he did not know who shot Rico Rogers. The following year, at the habeas corpus hearing, Damaris Stepp denied making the statement to the Attorney General, reiterated his 2005 affidavit, and again admitted he did not see Christopher Dunn at the shooting, and also admitted that his trial testimony was still a lie. The only consistency in Damaris Stepp's changing stories is his admitted willingness to change his story for potential benefit from anyone who could give him a benefit. But the recantations of Damaris Stepp and Michael Davis will be supported, Your Honor, by eyewitness testimony of Eugene Wilson and the expert opinions of our eyewitness identification expert, Nancy Franklin, and our scene reconstruction expert, Scott Roeder. Eugene Wilson was one of the boys walking towards the house and facing the shooter that evening. He will testify that all he could see was a muzzle flash and a shadowy figure. Scott Roeder, the scene reconstruction expert, has recreated hundreds of scenes, and he will explain and demonstrate how the shooter surprised the boys that evening.
What did I do?
Hello.
Hang on. I started typing and all of a sudden it disappeared. Hang on.
I've done
Sorry.
that too.
Oh my Lord, I don't know where that came from. Share
You
screen.
stopped sharing the screen, or maybe. I
Yeah.
can't see. I can't tell.
There it is, I think. Yep. Share. It took me to a different page and everything. Bizarre. Bizarre.
Gross.
Let's
Well,
go
if you
again,
haven't
can I?
had breakfast yet, there's an option
Yeah.
for you. Gabby broke it. Gabby, you get blamed for everything. That sounds even worse. Makes me want to gag.
Mm-hmm.
Also, while we are sitting here, fun fact, last judge we saw at the Lamar Johnson hearing, he rode up to the bench in his motorized scooter, and this one looks like he rolls up to the bench in his
Yep.
wheelchair.
Yep.
So
It's not
I
good
don't
to
know what's
see
up
you.
with the
Yeah.
judges in St. Louis, but
Yeah.
after a while, you don't walk anymore.
No.
You
No.
just
Well,
ride.
he looks like there's something extra going on as well, like because just his posture, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I couldn't
Yeah.
figure out the other judge because they never showed him coming in, and then one day they did. They did. I'm like, oh, that's because he's coming like right up to the bench in his scooter. There was. It was like,
I was going to say something enough. I'm the one that's tired today. I can't remember. Yeah. Oh, Bride, don't no spoilers, but what does who can tell me what an epistaxis is? Talking about mucopolysaccharides.
I don't want to talk about
No.
muco anything.
No.
Because muco
What's an
equals
epistaxis?
mucus.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. Brian's. He's raising it. I
He
can.
knows it. He
I
knows
know
it.
he knows.
Mhm.
Ah, too bad Bree's not here. She would not. She'd
My
probably.
my belief is that doctors made up all these massive big words so that they could stand at the end of your bed and talk about what's wrong with you without you knowing.
Yeah.
Why would you call a bit of snot a mucopolysaccharide, for goodness sake?
Yeah. Just say it's. Yeah, snot.
Yep. Epistaxis is a blood nose.
Oh, a bloody.
Why wouldn't you
Oh,
just
okay.
why wouldn't you just call
Just
it that?
you have a bloody
Just
nose.
yeah, correct.
Good
I've lost
morning,
my train.
Adair.
Good morning, Adair. You're just in time.
You're just in time.
He's past the mucus.
You don't want it, Adair. Jody's hitting buttons.
What? What have I done?
You haven't put the hearing back up.
Oh, you can't hear it.
I can't see it.
Oh my lord! What's this doing today? I didn't touch anything.
There we go.
Sorry. How far along did we get?
It
Jay?
looks like it probably paused. Right.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Miss Estep or Mr. Crane? Is it you? Okay.
All right. So opening witnesses for the state.
Yes.
Please report,
You may.
counsel. In the early hours of May 19th, 1990,
I wasn't born, is what she should
Rico
say.
Rogers was murdered.
Yeah.
He was shot in the back of the head while hanging out on his front porch with two of his friends, Michael Davis and Demoris Stepp. Demoris Stepp was also shot at. A bullet missed him by an inch to the point where he could feel it fly past his head. Evidence that has been presented and considered in prior court proceedings, and that will be before this court again this week, is that Demoris Stepp looked towards the gangway where the shots were coming from, then began running from the porch, hopped a gate or two, and came to be in the presence of his other friends who had left the porch sometime earlier. Immediately, Demoris Stepp exclaimed, "Trap," or Christopher Dunn is shooting at us. Demoris Stepp identifies Christopher Dunn as the shooter instantly.
I tried to write my overview based on the closed captioning while I was listening to this afternoon, and you don't know how many times I changed Demoris Stepp's name.
Oh, yeah, because it's been different
It's
every
never
single
right on
time.
there.
Yes.
Yep.
It's kind of like
To his
Tashika
friends.
yesterday. They couldn't get
Yes.
Tashika.
Welcome, everybody, to
Yeah.
Division 18.
Uh-oh, you just went all the way back.
It's a good thing I have time-stamped it.
Okay, how's that?
It's going to be one of those days, isn't it? You feel it in the
Yep.
waters.
The shooter instantly to his friends prior to any investigation by or presence of law enforcement on the scene. Next, first responding officers come on scene, and DeMaurice Stepp tells them Christopher Dunn was the shooter. Homicide detectives then interview DeMaurice Stepp at police headquarters, where he tells them Christopher Dunn was the shooter. I looked him dead in the face. Homicide detectives also speak to Michael Davis at police headquarters, and he tells them Trap, who he identifies as Christopher Dunn, was the shooter. The evidence will show that detectives, or at least Detective Stidham, the lead detective in this case, and his investigating partners didn't know Christopher Dunn. Despite some allegations in the circuit attorney's motion to vacate, you will hear from Detective Stidham that he had never heard of Dunn, didn't know him. So DeMaurice Stepp and Michael Davis are presented separately with a 4-pack photo array containing a photo of the only Christopher Dunn police have in the system at that time. Both witnesses in their separate photo array identifications select a picture of Christopher Dunn and say, this is Christopher Dunn, this is who did it. 24 hours later, after Dunn had been arrested, DeMaurice Stepp participates in a live lineup to ensure they have the person that Stepp is identifying as Dunn. And he picks Dunn out of that lineup as the shooter. DeMaurice Stepp then talks to the prosecutor, the Honorable Stephen Omer, at a warrant application, and charges are issued against Christopher Dunn. DeMaurice Stepp and Michael Davis then testify at a grand jury. Michael Davis testifies at Christopher Dunn's original criminal trial about the shooting, about IDing Dunn as the shooter, and does so again in court. DeMaurice Stepp also testifies at Christopher Dunn's trial and IDs Dunn as the individual who shot at him and his friends, killing Rico Rogers. A jury deliberated and found Dunn guilty. Now this court is being asked to disturb that jury verdict and set a convicted murderer free based on evidence that cannot meet the circuit attorney's burden of clear and convincing evidence of actual innocence. I anticipate over the next 2 days of evidence, there will be one thing clear to this court, that the present day version of events is a well-crafted story. And who doesn't love a good story? The evidence will show, and you will see how over time, Dunn is presenting affidavits and statements of multiple witnesses claiming they have evidence that will exonerate him. Some of those statements, that information purported by Dunn, is wholly and directly in conflict with the story he's relying upon today. I anticipate this court will see the evolution of Christopher Dunn's story and how over time he or people working for him, whether inside or outside of prison, have cultivated the current version of Dunn's lies. The circuit attorney.
Can anyone else hear the judge heavy breathing, or is it just me?
No, it sounds like we're at the ocean having this hearing.
no,
We're at
it's
the beach.
judge.
'Cause I was like, what the heck is that noise?
I'm
Or like
looking at
somebody
you to
with
see how close you are to your mic, but no, it's the
no,
judge.
that's not me. It sounds like
Not me
we're either at
either.
the beach or somebody is cutting paper.
Yes, you are right, Adair. Correct.
Discuss different witnesses that this court will hear from that they claim support and
Stop
help them
cheating by
reach the
using
burden
Google.
of clear and convincing evidence of actual innocence. One eyewitness who identified Christopher Dunn, Michael Davis, certainly cannot meet that burden. This witness has never testified as to his recantation in court or in a deposition, and has never been subject to cross-examination. And that is evidence that simply cannot convince a court clearly and can to the burden of clear and convincing evidence. The second is DeMaurice Stepp. And I just recounted how DeMaurice Stepp was consistent every time he identified Christopher Dunn up until the point and after the jury trial. Not until DeMaurice Stepp, and the evidence will show that not until DeMaurice Stepp was in the Department of Corrections serving his own life sentence for first-degree murder,
Yeah, he's
that
got a
he makes
lapel
any
mic
sort
on.
of statement recanting his identification of Christopher Dunn. That is done in an affidavit that another inmate helped him write. And this affidavit and the information contained in it will be an
That's the judge,
example
dear.
of the evolution and cultivation of Christopher Dunn's story. And you will see that in this affidavit, DeMaurice Stepp states that he saw 4 shooters present at the scene. And he also states that another individual was amongst the friends on the porch or around the house, and his name was Tony Kelly. And this is because a couple years prior, and the evidence will show, that Christopher Dunn obtained an affidavit from Tony Kelly, where Tony Kelly swears in this affidavit that he claims to have been present at the shooting and saw 4 shooters responsible. Fast forward to 2017, after Christopher Dunn has filed for habeas relief in Texas County, an investigator for the Attorney General's office goes and speaks to DeMaurice Stepp, and what he says is entirely different than what is contained in his 2005 affidavit. He reiterates that he did see Dunn there at the time of the shooting, but wavers and says that there was a second person there, so he does not know which one, Dunn or the second individual, unidentified, was the triggerman. Then in 2018,
Just so you're not confused, their testimonies change multiple times throughout the trial, both Michael Davis and DeMaurice Stepp. They're inconsistent, they change, and they can't get their story straight, which is why that sounds confusing.
less than a year later, when Stepp testifies in court in the presence of Christopher Dunn, he says for the first time that he could not see anything. He did not see any shooter, which is vastly different than any previous statement he's given. I anticipate and I hope that this court will hear from DeMaurice Stepp and can make those credibility determinations from his testimony. And I don't know what he'll testify to now, 6 years later from his last statement. But no matter what his testimony is today or tomorrow, this week, I believe that this court will see the true motivation for Stepp's varying statements after his sworn testimony and identification of Christopher Dunn up until and after his jury trial. The circuit attorney also talked about presenting the testimony of Eugene Wilson as another person who was present. I anticipate the evidence will show that his testimony conflicts with every other statement contained in the information and evidence available to this court that the court shall consider. Just like Dunn's story has evolved in the form of what witnesses at the scene say happened that night, his story has also evolved surrounding his alleged alibi. And the court will hear that evidence, and I won't take too much time to talk about it, but I anticipate the evidence of his alibi that will be presented to this court will be all over the place. And when scrutinized against all the evidence and information available to the court to consider, the only thing that this court can be clearly convinced of is that there is no credible alibi. Witnesses for Dunn over the years have alleged police and prosecutor misconduct in the form of coercion and threats and pressure. You will hear from the lead detective and lead prosecutor on the case, and I anticipate their testimony will refute any such allegations. Detective Stidham will testify that law enforcement never threatened, coerced, or manipulated any statement from any witness related to this case. I anticipate that he'll testify that law enforcement did not know Christopher Dunn, did not have Christopher Dunn in their mind when this investigation started. They simply followed the evidence in their investigation, and it led to Christopher Dunn. And after presenting the case to the circuit attorney's office through a warrant application, Detective Stidham will testify that law enforcement has no further involvement with witnesses or the case. They handed the case over to the circuit attorney's office. It's their case. It's their witness. You'll also hear from, at the time, prosecutor Stephen Omer, now retired Judge Omer. And he'll testify that he never told any witness what to say. He did not threaten any witness or pressure them to lie. He simply assessed the strength of his case and witness credibility at the various steps along the way that he needed to, and presented a straightforward case to a jury. You'll hear that not only you'll hear about, and the jury also heard about, the one and only agreement that Judge Omer entered with DeMaurice Stepp for his truthful testimony, and that he never made any promises or guarantees beyond what was presented to the jury and available for that jury to scrutinize as to that witness's credibility. At the conclusion of this hearing, after considering all of the information and evidence available to this court has an important decision to make. The Attorney General carries no burden here. We do not have to read through that Christopher Dunn is guilty. The state has already proven that he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt back in 1991. This court is being asked if there is clear and convincing evidence of actual innocence. The evidence and information that is presented in court and that has been presented to previous courts will show that over the last 34 years, Christopher Dunn has crafted a story, but not a convincing one. At the end of this hearing, we will respectfully ask this court to uphold Christopher Dunn's lawful conviction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eastep.
All right. So
Are we ready with our first witness?
up is Eugene Wilson. 29.
Wait till the entire question is asked before answering. And if there's an objection, let me rule before answering, okay?
Okay.
You're going to have to really keep your voice.
What time have we got you till, AJ? What time? Just remind me what time you need to be off.
Probably 9:15,
And the time is
8:57.
okay. Cool.
Sorry, I was trying to retype my message that I don't know why got wouldn't go through. So I had to.
It might be StreamYard playing up today then.
I was
'Cause I don't
just
know
as like
what's going
YouTube
on.
rejected your comment. Like, okay, because it said
No.
nothing. It said nothing. It just talking about going to halfway into the tube. I hate MRIs and they give me really bad claustrophobia.
Mhm.
And I think I only got a halfway in because they just need my back and my leg. But still that thing sliding up to me,
Yeah.
like I get super anxious. So
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to it and not looking forward to it. I need it done, but
Yeah.
I need to like talk to myself.
You got any Valium?
I do not
No.
remain. I just have to tell myself to remain
Mm.
calm. It'll
Mhm.
be over in a minute. Hopefully they'll give me music to listen to. That generally helps me, but I don't know.
Yeah. Good luck. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Tell me that. Yeah, absolutely. That's it's the best
Yeah,
thing.
they used to do that, and then now they're just like, "Hey, are you claustrophobic?" "Yep." "Okay, bye." "Okay, good to know. Deal with it."
Mhm.
They used to just, do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree, George. That's all I want. I just
Yeah.
need to know my path forward and what we're going to do, and also just like to sleep in my bed.
Mm.
I'm kinda tired of sleeping in the recliner.
Yep.
Voice up because it seems like you're soft spoken, okay?
You too,
Okay.
Jed. Okay. Good
You may
grief.
proceed. Miss Moore, correct? Okay.
Please tell us your name.
Eugene Wilson.
Oh my god.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Wilson.
Well, I'm a little bit over 50 years old now. And
You should
Okay.
be
I've
singing
been in
blues.
St. Louis on and
There's
off.
a character that
California.
sounds like him, and I can't think of what it is.
You're going to have to get a little closer
I've
to the
been
mic.
in St. Louis most of my life and been back and forth in California.
What do you currently do for work, Mr. Wilson?
Working warehouse.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I do contract with windows. Contract windows.
Where do you
Kim is-
currently live,
Kim-
Mr. Wilson?
Kim got it.
Right
Kim got
now,
it.
North City.
Yes.
I
Very
want to go back to 1990. How old were you?
Yes.
I was about 15 to 16, round up in that range.
What neighborhood of St. Louis were you living in at the time?
Back then they called it the West Side.
Would that have been also referred to as the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood?
Correct.
How did you know Christopher Dunn?
My darling.
Kind of grew up with him.
Can't get enough of your
Tell
love,
us a little bit
babe.
about.
Yeah, just pull the mic closer and just.
Yes, I kind of we grew up together.
Tell us a little bit about your experience with Christopher Dunn.
Well, really his father the one had everybody out in the neighborhood with the drunk corps and everything. So that's how we really actually got to know each other through my sister. She was with the drunk corps.
How close were you with Christopher Dunn's family?
Real close. I've been in the house and everything.
In 1990, how did you know Rico Rogers?
We was we grew up on Labadee, and he like moved over there like a year or two before then.
A year or two before 1990.
Correct.
How would you describe your relationship with Rico Rogers?
We were real close. I considered him as a little brother at that time.
Why did you consider Rico Rogers a brother?
I was basically staying with them. I was working with his mother. His mother got me a job. His mother got me a job.
Describe a little bit more your relationship with Rico Rogers' mother.
Well, after my mother passed away at the age of 14, I basically was staying with them down the street from where I usually stayed. So I basically moved in.
And you said that Rico Rogers' mother got you a job.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, she saw that I wasn't working, whatever. So she hooked me and a few other guys up at the job at Taco Bell. So we've been working.
Now, Mr. Wilson, to the right, I have an aerial view of the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood. In the upper left corner, we have Goodfellow Boulevard. In the lower right corner, we have Belt Avenue. And then running perpendicular, we have Labadee Avenue. Could you come down from the witness stand and using this red marker, mark where Rico Rogers' house was?
I bet you that wasn't in the 1991 trial.
No, I mean, really, what?
Mr. Wilson, I see that you have marked with a red circle about equidistant.
Go on, what were you going to say?
No, I just, I don't know, because
It's
everything's
technology.
come so far.
Mm,
It's hard to look back on these trials because we expect so much in there that wasn't
yeah.
around.
hmm
So it was probably
Actually,
simple
they
like
bring
that.
a bit of there is a crime scene reconstructionist they bring in who has it all this high tech stuff testifying later. So we do
But
bring the 20th century into it.
yeah, but that probably did happen. Go circle, because what else are you going to do to show it at that point in time,
Distant between Clara Avenue and Goodfellow Boulevard on the south side of Labadee. Is that where Rico Rogers lived? Mr. Wilson, how old was Rico Rogers in May of 1990?
I'm assuming that he was like a year or two younger.
In May of 1990, about how long had Rico and his family lived in the neighborhood?
About a year and a half.
How did you know Marvin Tolliver?
We grew up together also.
How old was Marvin Tolliver in May 1990?
I believe he's like a little bit older than me.
How did you, Marvin Tolliver, and Christopher Dunn know each other?
We all grew up together in the neighborhood.
Tell us a little more about that.
Well, like I said, Christopher Dunn's father used to have drunk call, get all the guys and females together, having everybody out in the neighborhood.
And in May of 1990, would you come back down and mark on the map where Marvin Tolliver lived in red marker?
It sounded like he said Christopher Dunn's dad used to have drunk court.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I couldn't even pick it up off
And
the
I
closed
see in red
captionings.
marker you've circled
It's drunk core, but I think he might have had like some community project where he kept people off the streets or something like that.
Something.
Something to that effect. That's the impression I got.
house at the northwest corner of Clara Avenue and Labadee Avenue, the third house from the left. Is that correct? Mr. Wilson, how did you know Demoris Stepp?
Well, they was like the new guys in the neighborhood. They wasn't in the neighborhood that long.
Would it be fair to say that you didn't know Demoris Stepp very well?
Not as well as everybody else.
How old was Demoris Stepp in May of 1990 about?
I believe they was a lot younger.
How did you know Michael Davis?
The same. They was kind of new in the neighborhood.
For both Demoris Stepp and Michael Davis, about how new were they to the neighborhood?
I say back then they was real freshly new.
How old was Michael Davis in May of 1990?
I'm not for sure, but I believe he was younger.
Mr. Wilson, I want to go back to May 18th, 1990, a little earlier in the day. What do you remember doing that day?
We was all down Marlon Tolliver house, better known as Pig back then. And well, we was known with the dogs. We used to breed dogs at that time.
And who all was hanging out at Marvin Tolliver's house?
It was I think it was, the names you just mentioned, and Pig, Nuki, and then later on that same day, Christopher Dunn showed up.
About what time do you remember Christopher Dunn getting there? About what time of day?
I say evening time.
What did you and Christopher Dunn do?
We sat back and talked because he was recently released.
Released from incarceration?
Correct.
What did you and Christopher Dunn talk about?
What was going on in the neighborhood, how everything been, trying to catch up.
What was going on in the neighborhood? What changes did you talk about in the neighborhood?
Well, there's a lot of, back then, a lot of new gang members popping up in the neighborhood. Everything wasn't the same like it was at first.
So after Christopher had been released from incarceration, the neighborhood had changed from when he came in?
Correct.
You mentioned that some gangs had moved in. What gangs specifically?
Considered the Bloods.
And to your knowledge, Mr. Wilson, was Christopher Dunn in a gang?
Is that the same gang as YNW Melly is apparently associated with the Bloods?
Yeah, supposedly. I don't
So
believe
the-
I think they were trying to get him and he didn't go. I have a lot of thoughts on his trial.
So is YNW Melly, is this like where he's from as well, or?
No, they're all
Is it-
over the country. So
Okay.
you can have Bloods and Crips. I probably have them in my little town and don't know it.
Okay.
It doesn't, like, they're everywhere.
All right. Cool.
Oh, no. No,
Did Christopher Dunn identify himself as either a Crip or a Blood?
neither.
Now, you said that the names that I mentioned earlier, Michael Davis, Demoris Stepp, Marvin Tolliver, were at the house that day. Were they also there when Christopher was there?
Correct.
And what were Michael Davis and Demoris Stepp's opinions of Christopher Dunn?
They didn't too much care for him
Why would that be?
because of the color that Christopher Dunn had on that day.
What color was Christopher Dunn wearing?
To me, it was normal clothing, but it was like blue, white, button-down shirt.
And why would Michael Davis and Demoris Stepp be upset that Christopher Dunn was wearing blue? Mr. Wilson, did Michael Davis or Demoris Stepp express to you why they were upset with Christopher Dunn wearing blue?
Because they was affiliated with the opposite color.
They were affiliated with the Bloods who wore red.
Correct.
How did Rico Rogers know Christopher Dunn?
He didn't know him at all.
Before May 18th, are you aware of any altercations or issues that Rico Rogers, Demoris Stepp, or Michael Davis had with Christopher Dunn?
No.
Now, Mr. Wilson, I want to talk about the shooting on May 18th, 1990. What do you remember doing before the shooting?
Before the shooting, we all gathered up some change, went through the Chinaman.
And when you say we all gathered up some change, who are you talking about?
It was me, Marlon Tolliver, and the two names that you mentioned. We all gathered up some change, and me and Pig walked towards the Chinaman.
And so when you say the names I mentioned, DeMaurice Stepp and Michael Davis.
Correct.
So, Mr. Wilson, if you could come down from the podium and mark on the map in blue where the restaurant was that you went to go get food.
He has red. Give him blue. Kim, YouTube wouldn't let your message come through, but that's my town too. I saw it.
Mr. Wilson, I see that in
I
blue
didn't.
you've circled
It was
building at the
YouTube said no.
southwest corner of Labadie and Belt. Is that correct? And that's where the restaurant that you and Marvin Tolliver walked to? So, Mr. Wilson, as you walked from Marvin Tolliver's house to the restaurant at the corner of Labadie and Belt, what direction did you and Marvin Tolliver walk?
At that time, going towards the Chinaman, we was walking east.
Food did you get at the restaurant?
We had ordered April young gravy.
I hope not.
April, it was real cheap and it was a big meal
No worries.
at that time.
Kim, it blocks everything.
And after you got the food, what direction did you walk?
We started walking west.
Now, as you were walking west, how close to the house did you get whenever the shots began to be fired?
We was almost at the house, like right there in front.
Mr. Wilson, in that big binder in front of you, if you could open it and turn to tab 15.
Holy crap.
I think that's a transcript of the original trial.
This is Move-ins Exhibit 15, which has been admitted, and habeas petitioners Exhibit 8. Mr. Wilson, do you recognize this photograph?
Yes,
What is this a photograph of?
that's Marvin Tolliver house.
Oh, chat moves too
Mr.
quick.
Wilson, there are two houses in the photo. Which house is Marvin Tolliver's?
The one with the gated around.
Would that be the left or the right photo?
That'll be the right.
So Jody, in the last trial, and then I'm going to jump off here. The judge got onto the state because she was young. It was probably one of her first trials to do like that. But she handed him a binder, like the Innocence Project and the defense came in with, I mean, their stuff was, immaculate. And
Is this the Lamore Johnson trial?
yeah. And the state comes up, and this poor young girl, she comes up and she hands her binder, and the judge is like, what am I supposed to do with this?
I skipped that bit at the start because I did that with this judge.
He's like, there's no tabs in here. It's not my job to go through here and read this and find the tabs. Like, you don't he was like just nailing her, and he never got off her case the whole entire hearing. He just was on her. I was like, you poor thing. But as George said in that hearing, she will learn. I hope she learned, and she'll do better next time. And she'll tab everything in her life from here on out. I don't care what it is. Her grocery list is tabbed. Like, everything is tabbed.
They went through a few of the exhibits before the opening statements that I skipped, and she dumped a whole heap of binders on the judge's table, and it's like, what am I doing with this?
What am I supposed to do with all this?
Yeah.
But I think that's why it takes so long for them to come back with their rulings, because they do have to go. They got to go through it all. So, all right, I'm going to put you guys on my phone, so I'll still be listening.
Okie dokie. Drive safely. Say hi to Dad, and
Will do.
We'll speak to you. You'll speak to us in chat before you go for your MRI. Yeah. Possibly. If not, good luck.
Yeah, I won't be, because it's not till 4:30. So you should be sleeping at that time.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, I will be.
I won't know anything tomorrow, but I should know hopefully something by the end of the week.
Get them to email you, tell them you need a copy of the report for your insurance, and I'll read it to you. I'll read it
I'll
for
be
you.
able to see it once they upload it to my doctor because it all comes to my portal, my patient portal. So everything
Yep.
they do comes to
Cool.
that. So I just have to wait for them to do that. And my sister-in-law does MRIs, so
Cool.
I expect to probably get a phone call from her later.
Excellent. So you got someone to interpret at least.
Yeah, she's just not she's not going to be there this afternoon, but it won't surprise me if she doesn't go and look at it, take a look.
Yeah.
So she generally does that for me, under the radar. Of course, she never does anything for me like that ever. That was a
No.
joke. It was a joke. So, all
All
right.
right, darling.
I'll be listening. So everybody behave. I've already used my mom voice to tell Jody she better be sleeping at 4:30. Don't make me use it twice in one day.
You should have been booping whilst you were.
I should have, but I'm being nice. I'm just letting you two put them in later. But don't think that's going to last forever. I know you
All right,
promised
darling.
nothing, AJ, Gabby, whatever. I'm out.
Bye. See you,
guys.
darling. Alrighty. If you, Bri, if you or Gabby want to jump in.
Mr. Wilson,
Whoop
in
on
this
him.
photo, in the bottom right corner next to the sidewalk, there are the initials EW in black ink with a circle. Do you remember placing your initials on this photo in 2018?
Yes.
What does your initials there mean?
Where we was at
That's where you were when.
when the shots fired out.
And Mr. Wilson, on Marvin Tolliver's house on the right, to the right side of the steps, are the initials EW in black pen circled. Do you remember placing your initials here in 2018?
Yes.
And what does that signify?
That's where Rico was laying at the end
After he was shot?
after he was shot.
Now, Mr. Wilson, to the left of the leftmost house in the photo, in a brush area, there is a circle in black ink. Do you remember placing that circle in 2018?
Yes.
What does that signify?
Where the shots were fired.
That's where the shooter came from?
Yes.
So whenever you approached the house right before the gunshots were fired, who was sitting on the porch?
It was the two names that you mentioned and Rico. They was actually sitting on the steps.
And as you approached them, where were their heads turned?
The heads were looking at us coming from the Chinaman.
And why were they?
Their heads was facing towards us as we was coming back from the Chinaman.
And why were they looking at you?
Because we had the food.
Did you ever see
Enough reason for
the
me.
three boys on the porch turn their heads at all before the gunshots were fired?
No.
So, Mr. Wilson, you said that the shooter came from the left side of the house to the left of Marvin Tolliver's house. What happened? Describe what happened with the shooting.
As we was walking from the Chinaman, as we got closer, that's when the shots fired off and everybody jumped down.
What do you remember seeing about the shooter?
It was real dark, and it was at that time it was dark, and the only thing I saw was the fire coming from the gun.
So the only thing you saw were the flashes of the gun.
Correct.
What were the lighting conditions like around Marvin Tolliver's house?
It was like real dark because of the street lighting.
What about the street light?
The street light had a tree in front of it.
Mr. Wilson, you mentioned that you could only see gun flashes. Could you see anything about the shooter, such as clothing or any identifiable characteristics?
Yeah, the flash showed a dark shadow, so the person had dark clothing on.
Mr. Wilson, after you realized that Rico Rogers had been shot, what happened next?
After he was shot, we was all standing above him at that time.
And before the police arrived, what did Michael Davis or Demora Stepp say about the shooting?
It had been, at that time, they called him Trap, Christopher Dunn.
What did they say about Christopher Dunn?
They said that it had been him.
It had to have been him?
Yeah.
And before the police came, what was your response to them saying that?
I didn't believe so.
And why not?
But, 3 days before then, it was another incident happened with Rico.
So let's talk about this incident. What do you remember happening 3 days before Rico Rogers was killed?
Rico's mother, boyfriend, jumped her, and we had ended up jumping him.
So let's break that down a little bit more. So you were living with Rico Rogers at the time,
Correct.
and Rico Rogers' mother was dating someone.
Correct.
When you say that Rico Rogers' mother's boyfriend jumped her, what do you mean by that?
He was putting his hands on her.
He was abusing her.
Yeah, correct.
So 3 days prior to the shooting, what did you and Rico Rogers and a few others do in response to that?
We jumped him real badly, and he was on the porch. Ended up on the ground. Badly beat.
Where was this boyfriend living in May of 1990?
At that time, he was staying with us until that day.
After Rico Rogers was killed, did you ever see this man again?
No.
Now, Mr. Wilson, when the police arrived at the scene, did you speak to them about what you saw?
No, they had talked to us, but the other two guys was doing all the talking.
And what were you doing instead of speaking to the police?
I was quiet. I was normally quiet at that age.
Were you speaking with Rico Rogers' mother at all?
Yes.
What were you doing with Rico Rogers' mother?
I was mainly there comforting her because of the loss.
And why specifically would you be comforting Rico Rogers' mother?
Because she just recently lost another son.
Mr. Wilson, did the police ever try to contact you in their investigation?
No.
Did you ever speak to any prosecutor about Christopher Dunn's case?
No.
Mr. Wilson, after May 18th, 1990, did you pay any attention to this murder case?
No, not after that day.
Why weren't you paying attention to the murder case?
It was real sad at the time. Like I said, I was more with the mother, trying to comfort her, me and a few others.
And what happened to Rico Rogers' mother after the shooting?
After that, she started having cancer. So she was going back and forth to the hospital.
Mr. Wilson, at the end of 1990, where did you go?
A little bit after that, I moved with my brother on the South City.
So in the end of 1990, you moved out of the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood.
Correct.
Mr. Wilson, have you ever been incarcerated?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Back in 92, sale and possession of cocaine.
How long did you spend incarcerated?
Total of 4 years.
What prisons were you incarcerated in?
Boonville.
During that time, did you ever have any interaction with Christopher Dunn?
No.
Did you ever have any interaction with Demora Stepp?
No.
And since that time,
You mean in the original trial, Kim? I don't know. Poor investigation, perhaps. I think they believed that the two testimonies they got pretty much sealed the deal and probably didn't search any further. So what's the booger sugar? Oh, booger sugar. How did that get on here? I suppose. Yeah. Fair enough.
Time since, about the year 2000, have you had any other felony convictions?
No.
Mr. Wilson, after May 18th, 1990, when was the next time that you spoke to someone about what you saw?
I believe it was 2018 or 2017.
What do you remember speaking to someone about?
Well, the guy came to it, the investigator. The investigator came to my house looking for me
What did the investigator talk to you about?
about Christopher Dunn case.
What did the investigator tell you?
He told me that he was locked up. I ain't know he was locked up at that time. So that's when he started talking about the case.
You mentioned it a little bit in that answer, but what was your reaction to learning that Christopher Dunn was still in prison?
I was shocked, and I was shocked because of the situation.
Between 1990 and 2016, 17, 18, when you spoke with this investigator, did you talk to anyone else about this case?
No.
Between 1990 and when you spoke with the investigator, did you ever talk to Christopher Dunn?
Oh my God, I ate that last night. A whole tub of Ben and Jerry's choc chip cookie dough ice cream. And I was I was sitting here researching something at the same time with a spoon and the tub just going. And before I realized that I'd eaten the whole bloody thing. But it was good.
Dunn?
No.
Mm-mm.
How many times did you meet with the investigator?
Well, he came over a few times.
DoorDash it, Gabby.
He came over my house a few times.
About how many times do you remember?
I believe it was like 3 times that week and 3 the following.
Mr. Wilson, do you remember signing an affidavit in this case?
Yes.
Which visit do you remember signing this affidavit at with the investigator?
I believe it was maybe the last time.
And whenever you met with this investigator to sign the affidavit, what had you just gotten done doing?
I was just getting off of work. I was working graveyard.
And
I was getting off of work. I was working graveyard shift.
who wears the pants of the family, Gabby?
Mr. Wilson, who prepared that affidavit?
He did from the multiple times he visited.
So the investigator prepared the affidavit and you signed it?
Correct.
Mr. Wilson, if you could turn to tab 10 in that binder. This is Movements Exhibit 10, and it was Habeas Exhibit 3. Mr. Wilson, do you recognize this document?
Yes. Yes.
So I again say,
What is
and
this document?
This is the document that he had me sign.
This is the affidavit that you signed with the investigator.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson, if you go to page 2 of your affidavit, apologies, go to page 1 of your affidavit. If you look in the 7th paragraph down in about the middle of the page, do you see where it says, we had just been to Chinaman's restaurant and we were sitting there talking and eating our rice? Do you see that?
now I want fried rice.
No.
Are you on page 1 of your
That's
affidavit?
right, then.
Are the page numbers labeled? Because he's on the first page.
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Wilson. Paragraph 6, it starts the night before. Do you see that?
Yes.
So at the end of that paragraph, it states, we had just been to Chinaman's restaurant and we were sitting there talking and eating our rice. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes, but it wasn't that day. We always sit there eating right.
So why did the investigator write this sentence in your affidavit to your knowledge?
Do you want to respond?
I can rephrase.
Okay.
Mr. Wilson, whenever the investigator wrote this affidavit, it was after having multiple conversations with you.
Correct.
And what did you tell him about sitting on the porch and eating rice after visiting the Chinese restaurant?
It was several times I told him that we were sitting on the steps on the porch eating.
Is it possible that the investigator misconstrued you saying that you sat on the porch that night?
Correct.
And Your Honor, I would note that this is all testimony that Mr. Wilson has already testified about in his habeas proceeding, but
Your Honor, I believe those objections would have been made at that time too, but I'd like to review the objections for the record.
Okay. I think I'll sustain that objection unless you want to rephrase. I'll sustain that objection unless she wants to rephrase somehow.
Mr. Wilson, if you go to 2 paragraphs below that, that starts with the words almost immediately. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it states almost immediately after the shots were fired and we had returned to Rico, I heard one of the others say, maybe it was Chris Dunn. It must have been Chris Dunn. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
And then if you go to the last paragraph that starts, Chris Dunn had recently been incarcerated.
Yes.
Now, the last sentence says, during that same time, Chris had become affiliated with the Crips while in jail, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember telling the investigator that?
No.
What do you remember telling the investigator?
I was telling him about the neighborhood had changed from how it used to be until the Crips and Bloods came.
Mr. Wilson, going to the page 2, in the second paragraph, do you see where it starts, I was standing?
Correct.
And it states, I was standing right next to Rico when he was shot. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So whenever it says you were standing right next to Rico, what did you mean when you told the investigator that?
After the shooting, after everybody got up, after the shooting, when everybody got up, we was all standing next to Rico.
And Mr. Wilson, in the third paragraph, it starts, I knew that. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it states, I knew that Chris Dunn was light-skinned like myself, so if it had been Chris, I might have seen him or his light skin in the dark, but I could not see anything about the shooter, which would allow me or any of us to identify the shooter. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's what you remember telling the investigator?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson, is everything else in your affidavit correct to your knowledge?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson, I have one final question for you. Why are you testifying here today?
Because the truth, he should never been here.
Could you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
I know Christopher Dunn, and he's not that type of individual from what my experience with him.
And if you had seen Christopher Dunn that night, would you be testifying here today?
Yes, I would have.
Sorry, Mr. Wilson, let me rephrase my question. If you had seen Christopher Dunn as the shooter that night, would you be here today testifying that Christopher Dunn was not the shooter?
Yes. I would, if he was the shooter, yes, I'd be here testifying against him. But by him, I know he's not the shooter, so it's the opposite.
Apologies, Mr. Wilson. Let me clarify. So your memory is that Christopher Dunn was not the shooter.
Correct.
And your relationship with Christopher Dunn would not change that.
Correct.
No further questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Hang on. There may be cross-examination, Ms. Estep.
He thinks he's going to go.
Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning.
Now, you just testified that you knew that Christopher Dunn was the shooter, correct?
Correct.
But you did not see the shooter.
No.
And so you believe he wasn't the shooter, but you can't say because you did not see the shooter. Is that fair?
That's fine.
Okay. And Mr. Wilson, you're the same Eugene Wilson who was born on June 26, 73, is that correct?
Correct.
And back in May of 1990, and I know you circled it for us on this map, but you would agree with me, you can't see house numbers in this map, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so you were residing at, was it 5751 Labadee?
Yes.
And am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And you testified a little bit about how you and your friends in the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood had nicknames.
Correct.
I think you said Pig,
Correct.
and that would have been Marlon Tolliver. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. And then I think you said Nuki. Was that Marlon's brother?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what his real name was?
No.
Okay. Nicknames were easier for you to remember?
Yes.
Okay. And was your nickname Gino?
Yes.
And then did Rico Rogers have a nickname?
No, we just call him Rick.
Ricky? Okay.
Rick.
But Ricky wasn't his given name. Is that
Right.
fair?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. And so you're aware that when police investigate a crime, they create police reports.
Yes.
And so if there are police reports referring to Pig or Nuki or Gino, you just told me who those people would be.
Yes.
And your house, Mr. Wilson, was on one end of Labadee, kind of close to the intersection. Was it the last house on the street?
Yes.
Okay. And then Martin Oliver or Pig, however you want me to refer to him, he circled his house in red. I'm going to go over here. Can you see the marker from where you are?
Not really, but
Okay. So right here would have been this third house in from Clara. This would have been Pig's house.
correct.
Is that right? Okay. And so that was on the same side of the street as you.
Yes.
And then Rico or Ricky, the victim, he was on the other side of the street, kind of right in the middle. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Wilson, you testified that you were hanging out with that kind of group of friends, kids from the neighborhood.
Correct.
Were they your friends?
Some of them I grew up with, and some of them was the new guys.
Like
So,
new acquaintances?
yes.
And you testified that you hung out on Pig's porch. There
Correct.
at the corner. That's the one at the corner of Clara and Labadee quite a bit.
Yes.
And on the night of the shooting, I don't know if you testified to this today, but you guys had been outside for quite a bit.
Yes.
All day. Were you about to say all day
Yes.
or all night?
Well, most of the day.
Okay. And at some point, you and Pig, Marlon Tolliver, and do you remember another individual named Derry D or Derry Davis being there?
No.
Okay. Is it possible he was there and you just don't remember?
If he was, he probably showed up after the incident.
Okay. And so you leave the porch to walk to the Chinaman, which is about a block and a block and change down the street.
Correct.
And can't really tell from, and I'm not sure when this aerial view is from, but where's the entrance to Chinaman? Was it on Belt or was it on Labadee?
It was on Belt.
Okay, so you would go around the corner and enter from right here?
Correct.
And so when you left to go to the Chinaman, it's your memory that Rico Rogers, I know you may not remember their names, but the Demora Stepp and Michael Davis, the other kids,
Correct.
they were left behind.
Yes.
And your testimony is that you were walking towards Pig's house when you saw gunfire. Is that fair?
Correct.
And you just looked at your affidavit, Mr. Wilson. I'm going to have you turn to it again. I believe it's still in front of you. It would be what's marked as Movements Exhibit 10. Is it you? Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. It's a big binder. It didn't look like that you had flipped that far. Okay. And you would agree with me, Mr. Wilson, that you initialed the front of this first page at the bottom right corner?
Yes.
Okay. And at the top of the page, it says that first being duly sworn on your oath, you state the following facts. Did I read that correctly?
Correct.
And then on the second page, You sign your name. Is that
Correct.
fair? Okay. And it says that you signed your name in front of a witness,
Yes.
correct? Okay. And so in that first page, on the 6th paragraph, just look along with me. I want to make sure I read this correctly. After you sign this affidavit attesting that it was true and under oath, right?
Correct.
And then you had to be sworn in whenever you signed it.
Correct.
Okay. And you testified, or you swore in this statement that you were sitting after having just been to Chinaman's restaurant. We were sitting there talking and eating our rice. Did I read that correctly?
Thanks for
Correct.
coming, Kim.
And your
Don't work
testimony
too
is
hard.
that
We continue on tomorrow with the rest of the hearing.
your
Same
testimony
time, same
is
place.
that the shots, well, I don't think you testified to it today, but looking at Movements Exhibit, I believe it's marked as 15, this photograph.
Correct.
This was from your, can I approach, Judge?
She may.
This was from your testimony at another hearing back in 2018. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
Okay, and it's really difficult to see, so I just wanted to look at it together. But these initials in the bottom right corner, that's where you're testifying you were.
Correct.
And this, you can kind of see a little scribble there. This is where you're testifying the other kids were.
That's where Rico. That was Rico was laying there after the shooting.
After the shooting. Okay.
Correct.
And then there's a kind of a scribble in this corner. This is where you indicated at the habeas hearing that the gunfire or the shots were coming from.
Correct.
And I think you testified to this at that hearing, but at the time of the shooting of Rico's murder, the conditions in front of his house were quite different. This brush wasn't there.
Correct.
And I want to turn again to your sworn affidavit. If you can look on the first page, paragraph 7, the one that starts with suddenly.
Yes.
Okay, it says suddenly someone started shooting at us, quote, boom, boom, boom. The shots came from in front of the house to the west. So looking at that picture in front of the house to the west of Rico's house, that is to the left, is that fair?
In front of the pig.
Do you want, I'm not sure it does, but maybe you can clarify, Ms. Eastep.
Oh, I apologize. I misspoke. You said that it came from the west of the house the porch that you were on.
Yes.
Okay. And so you circled that Pig's house is here. And then it looks like this lot, at least from when this aerial photograph was taken, is a vacant lot. At least here.
Now. Yes.
Was it a vacant lot at the time?
Yes.
Okay. Well, there was just a house in that picture, didn't we? My
Yes.
question is right to the left or to the west?
To the
of
west.
Pig's house? Was there a structure there?
No, it was the same.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you to look back at, I think maybe we're misunderstanding each other. You could look back to movement 15. And that's my fault, maybe I asked a bad question. But this is, sorry, trying to get a better view. This is
Pig house.
Pig's house. So this is not a vacant lot, correct? Right
No,
here.
that's a house.
Okay.
Correct.
And so whenever you testified in your affidavit, when you talk about the house to the west, is that the house you're talking about?
Correct.
And so looking at your affidavit, and I apologize, I'm having you flip back and forth. But looking at your affidavit, that paragraph, suddenly someone started shooting at us, boom, boom, boom. The shots came from in front of the house to the west. Did I read that correctly?
He wasn't there yet. You might
Oh,
be
I'm
there.
sorry. Do you see which paragraph I'm talking about? It starts with suddenly.
Suddenly. Yes.
So suddenly someone started shooting at us, boom, boom, boom. The shots came from in front of the house to the west. Did I read that correctly?
Correct.
And whenever the shots started, it's your testimony that you were on the sidewalk, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Wilson, Whenever the shots started, what did you do? What was your physical reaction?
Everybody's reaction was to jump.
Well, let me. I'm asking about your reaction.
My reaction is I jumped downwards towards the ground.
Jumped down towards the ground, so you kind of ducked.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and then whenever, and I think you tried to clarify this on direct examination, but on the second page of your affidavit, when you testify or you swore to that first sentence, I was standing right next to Rico when he was shot. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
It looks like he's getting uncomfortable in his wheelchair, unfortunately. Poor bugger.
All right, and Mr. Wilson, you talked a lot about the lighting conditions of the neighborhood, or at least surrounding Pig's house, right?
Correct.
And it was dark. You said that
Can
it
hear
was
him
too
swallow.
dark to see where the shots came from.
No, not really.
Okay, well, I'm gonna look at, let's see. Or I'm sorry, I misstated that. It was dark where the gunshots were coming from. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. And there was a street light. I'm going to point at this map again. I don't think it'll show us street lights, but so you can kind of see a shadow. There's a shadow of a street light here, which indicates maybe on the corner here. Is that fair?
No, it was more towards the house next door to Pig.
Okay, so there was one right here.
Yes, across the street.
Okay. So there was
Across the street from Pig.
Okay, so there was a street light across the street from Pig, so like maybe right here.
It was like more towards the building next door to Pig, across the street.
Well, let me ask you this: I'll have you come down here.
Yeah.
So that we know what you're
They
talking about.
They actually spend the next 20 minutes pretty much going backwards and forwards on, well, you didn't see who it was too dark, you couldn't see it. No, but it wasn't him. But you can't tell me that that's not him because you couldn't see properly. They just go around and around in circles, basically. Basically, the upshot of it is that it was too dark. Nobody saw who it was. Nobody could identify who it was, and there was no other witnesses. They just saw the gun flash, and that was it. Nothing else. And that's been from the very, very beginning. So we go to the next testimony is actually Michael Davis's testimony, who was obviously one of the two people that blamed this crime on Christopher Dunn. And it's at his transcripts. They actually have an audio, a video of his transcript from his testimony. So that starts at 1:46. Oh, sorry. No. The next one is Curtis Stewart's testimony. Sorry. And it is the transcript. But the lady at the one of the prosecutors, one of the defense attorneys comes up and reads the transcript on behalf of Curtis Stewart, 138. Okay. And then the following one is Michael Davis. This is only 8 minutes. So the lady on the stand is reading on behalf of the witness, Curtis Stewart.
And Judge, this is in tab 3, starting on page 49.
What page?
49.
Oh, okay.
And I would note for the record that these designations were provided to the Attorney General in advance and we received no objections.
Okay,
May I proceed?
you may proceed.
Could you state your name for the record, please?
Curtis Stewart?
And are you currently in prison?
Yes.
Okay. In fact, before you were convicted and sent to prison, were you in the city workhouse?
Yes.
And that was awaiting trial in your case?
Yes.
How old were you when you caught your murder case?
15.
Okay. So could you describe what part of the jail you were incarcerated in?
I was in dorm 10 of the city workhouse.
So you were in there with other youthful men accused of crimes in the city?
Yes.
Were you in there with a man named DeMorris Stepp?
Yes.
And about what time frame would it have been that you were in the workhouse with him in the same?
From around like 90 to 91, but it was like in 91.
Okay. And do you recall overhearing any conversations that he had about testifying against Christopher Dunn?
Yes, sir.
What do you recall about that?
That he was talking over the phone at the time, and he said he didn't really know who killed the guy, Rico. And then a short period later, he said, I don't really give a fuck, no way. You know, I'm getting a deal out of it.
Okay. And did you know Mr. Stepp or Mr. Dunn from the streets before you were in jail?
Yeah,
And how did you know them?
just by hanging around the neighborhood.
Okay. And you were of similar age to these other men?
Yeah, me and DeMorris Stepp is the same age.
So did you hear him say anything else about his testimony against Mr. Dunn?
No, not in particular, other than the conversation that he had over the phone. But right afterwards, him and another guy ended up having a fight over it because of what he said over the phone.
Do you remember who this other man was?
His name was Anthony Green.
Okay. And did you witness this fight?
Yes, we was all in the juvenile dorm together.
And what precipitated that?
Because he said that after the conversation over the phone, a lot of other guys was approaching Stepp about the conversation. And then it got the Sandman all, we got beef, meaning that, you know, him and Mr. Dunn had problems, was on the street. And he was saying that it ain't not rules when you got beef and stuff like that. So, you know, him and the other guy to fighting on account of that.
You might have to explain what in layman's terms, what did you take that to mean what Mr. Stepp said?
As far as what?
What about the beef? Yeah. About the beef. Yeah.
That they had problems on the street.
Okay. And did he say anything else about why he was going to agree to testify against Mr. Dunn?
No, he just said that he was getting a deal out of it, so he didn't care.
And because of this incident, this fight, was Mr. Stepp transferred out of the dorm?
Yes, both of them got locked up. They went to the hole, and then he didn't come back to the dorm.
Who did you tell before that? You said a fight broke out about it. So how did everyone find out that Mr. Stepp had been making these comments?
Because all of us overheard him from the phone. We was in a small dorm in the city workhouse. They have small dorms with just 10 bunks in there. So, you know, the phone is just right out in the open. And so that's how the fight broke out, because they also overheard the conversation as well.
So he just said that loudly enough for everyone to overhear?
Well, it's like I said, we just in a dorm right there. The phone's just right there, and the TV is right next to the phone. So we was all right there. So that's how I kind of like it festered from there.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay.
Right. Next is Michael Davis. 146. So they've actually got a video up on the screen of his transcript. So it's like closed captioning on the screen. But you hear it as well.
I am at the Solano County Justice Center Detention Facility located at, I believe it's 500 Union Avenue in Fairfield, California, 94533. Are you in housing institution? Okay. Today's date is November 17th. It is approximately 9:50 hours. And I am in an interview room with Mr. Michael Davis. And could you say and spell your name? Michael Davis, MICHAE.
The only thing I don't know about this particular testimony is if it's from the original trial, like the deposition from the trial in 1991, or if it's from the Corpus Capus hearing in 2015. I'm not sure, but I believe it's from the original one.
Davis. And you're a junior? Yes, sir. Okay, Michael Davis Jr. And Michael, what's your jail ID number? 188198. And that's we're in Solano County. That's your Solano County. You're currently incarcerated right now, correct? Yes, sir. Okay, and what's your date of birth? 8977. Okay. Michael, I'm here to speak to you regarding an incident that occurred back on May 19th in 1990 involving a homicide. And to clarify your involvement or your account of that particular incident. So what I'd like to ask you, first of all, is at that time, did you live at 5563 Terry in St. Louis? Yes, sir. In 1990? Yes, sir. Okay. And how long had you been friends with Rico Rogers? Childhood friends, right? Since I know him since we went to school in elementary. In 19.
All right. Well, it looks like it might be the 2015 one then.
13 years old? Yes, sir. Okay. So you had known him since like first grade, or if you're 13 years old, you're.
So this is the one after they both recanted their testimonies, basically. So they have that hearing.
In junior high school, or so you've known him for several years? Yeah. Okay. Did you see the shooter who shot at you, Rico and DeMorris? No, sir. You did not? So you don't recall seeing anybody shooting at you on that particular occasion? No, sir. Were you scared when this happened? I wasn't scared, but it happened. But you were in fear because people were shooting in your direction. Right. Did at that time, at the time of the shooting, do you recall where you were? The address that you were at? No, sir. Would it have been in the 5600 block of Lavati or Lavity? Yes, but yeah, I'm not good familiar with the streets no more. So I've been out there so many years, but yeah. Who first brought up Christopher Dunn's name to you?
No one never brought his name. I think we brought up his name because we didn't like him. He was terrorizing the neighborhood.
And when you say we, who do you mean?
Me and Demorris.
You and Demorris? So you and Demorris were you trying to get back at Christopher Dunn for some particular reason, or?
Christopher Dunn was a Crip living in the Blood neighborhood.
Okay.
So he was hated regardless. And then he was pushing his weight around the neighborhood. He came in contact a few times with Ricky. And, but, you know, I don't know what that ended up to, but, no, actually, we didn't see him shoot. We didn't know who the shooter was. We just know somebody fired off some shots. It could have been anybody.
So tell me again, why was Chris Dunn's name brought up in this investigation to police officers?
Because he was the last person who got in an argument with Ricky.
Okay. Do you know what that argument was about?
There was some gangbanging stuff. There had to be some gangbanging stuff.
So even if this was 2015, that's what, 9 years ago now. So the whole trial, original trial, was based around the testimony of these two witnesses. And obviously they've both recanted and stated that they made it up and blamed it on him because he was involved in some gang affiliation, or he was throwing his weight around in the streets, and yeah, he wasn't white, so they blamed him. So it's now 2024, and it's taken that long for this law to allow. So in my eyes, that makes him factually innocent. There's nothing that should be holding him in prison any longer. That's like, just blows my mind. So 9 years later, they're still arguing over this law that Missouri has, because they can't put it to for review again until now, because the law pertained only to people that were on death penalty cases. So
Did you or Demorris ever tell the police or the prosecutor that Rico had shot a man the day before?
Yes.
and Rico was actually up looking at 30 years in prison as well for that crime, which is the plea deal that he took in order to testify against Christopher Dunn.
Did you tell the police or the prosecutor or both?
We never talked to no prosecutors and that. We just did an actual interview with the police afterwards, after the shooting, and then several years down the line, they come pull me from California back down to St. Louis, show me some pictures and tell me that, well, they had Ricky Mama contact me in California because I wasn't gonna come. You know what I'm saying? By the time I'm at the age of, well, it seemed like snitching, you know what I mean? And so I wasn't gonna come. So they had Ricky Mom called me, coerced me, and cry, and coerced me down. But you know what I'm saying? So I went down. And when I got down there to St. Louis, I denied it again, and they showed me pictures of Ricky that night. And they're like, this is what he did to your friend. You you should, you better go up in there and get him out the way, because he can do it to somebody else, you know what I'm saying, if not. And so I went in there on that and just said it was him. I didn't know it was him, never seen him. I only seen him a few times in my whole life anyway. Didn't know him, you know what I'm saying, about conversation. We never said any type of thing to each other. It was just out of animosity, we said it was him, basically. We wanted somebody to pay for it. He argued with Ricky, so we said it was him. We didn't know it was him. We never had no idea. We didn't know he shot at us that night. We don't know if he was trying to shoot it. We don't know if they were shooting at Ricky or all of us. It could have been some Bloods, some Crips shooting at us because we was Bloods at the time. Ain't no telling who shot. Ricky was just the unfortunate one to get shot.
Okay. And so, so just to back up and clarify, the police department, the detectives with the police department, did they interview you the day after Ricky was shot?
They interviewed us that night, never interviewed us again.
Okay, they interviewed you that night, and they issued a picture of Ricky after he was shot. And they said,
no, we went in there, like I said, we went in there as animosity that night. Ricky got shot. We said it was him. Right? Okay, now, that's all they did. The initial interview after who was the witnesses. You know, the police say who was the witnesses. They take it out time. They interview you, you know what I'm saying, so they can go after the suspect or whatever. And that was it. I didn't hear from the police until I was like already in, you know what I'm saying, 19, whatever age I was at. But I was already in California for several years before I heard from the police again. I guess after we fought his trial for so long, it was time for him, you know what I'm saying, to get it, you know what I'm saying, he was going to trial, you know what I'm saying, and that's when they came together. That's when I came down that, and then I don't know if it was the same detectives, were they still around at the time, or some more detectives taking over the case, but they was the ones who showed us pictures before, because I wasn't going to go back up in there and testify on the stand, you know what I'm saying, once they got me on there. And then that's when they showed me pictures right then and there. Several years later, like, this is your friend, you don't let them do this to your friend, you know what I'm saying, woo, woo, woo. So they coerced me to go up in there and say he did it. So when I know I wasn't alive, so he did it. I've never seen him do it, you know what I'm saying.
okay. When you use the word coerced, did they offer you an incentive for your testimony against Christopher Dunn?
They offered nothing. They just offered
So they just encouraged you to continue pointing Christopher Dunn as the suspect in the shooting of Ricky.
Yes, sir.
So did you see the man who Rico shot the day before? Ricky, aka Rico, aka Ricky, had shot the day before?
Oh,
Ricky's mother's boyfriend?
the one that put his hands on her.
Do you know what his name was? Do you know how old he was? Was he older than, he was an older person? In his 20s or?
I wouldn't even know.
Okay.
He's probably about in his 20s, 30s, something like that.
Did he look similar? Did he look like Christopher Dunn? Did those two?
I know one thing, because Dunn's light skinned. And I know Ricky's dad was dark skinned. Ricky's stepdad. I think so. If I ain't mistaken.
Okay.
From what I was seeing.
Okay, so the person, the man who Ricky shot the day before did not look anything like Chris Dunn. Okay. Were you encouraged by any police officer or detective to say that Chris Dunn did this shooting?
Well, yeah, like I said, after you get my mom got out the airport, I wasn't going to testify. You know what I'm saying? But even when they got me down to the police, when they got me down to the courthouse, I'm like, man, I'm not going to testify against dude. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know if you did it by this time. They didn't want me to come way down there. It was already in trial. They flew me down there on air, Spanish. So they forced me, well, basically like put the pictures in front of me and say, this is what he did to your friend. Put all the pictures in front of me. I said, yeah, he had bleed, you know what I'm saying? And all that. And bam, I said, okay.
And this is years later.
Years later.
After the shooting,
It
though.
was years after the shooting.
Okay.
I got all about the shooting. It was in my mind until I was subpoenaed to come to St. Louis.
Do you know what year that was?
It was in the 90s, though.
Okay. So, in the days after the shooting, Rico was shot. Did the police or anybody offer you or encourage you to say that Chris Dunn?
Nobody never came to see me. Nobody could come see me because I went to California right after that. Like about
Nope.
2 weeks after that, we flew to California.
Come here.
My mama came to live with her sister.
Okay.
So they couldn't contact me. They didn't know where I was at. I took them years and years to get caught up with me anyway. I probably would never get caught up with me if I wasn't in the system.
Okay. When you went back, they flew you back at their expense. Did they tell you to say anything?
No, they just said, go in there and testify, do your testimony. This is what he did to your friend. But basically, they did it with the pictures. It wasn't much for them to say. All they did was show me the pictures with his head blown off, and that's what he did to your partner. So that was like, that's enough right then and there. They didn't ask me again, like, well, are you sure this is the dude that did it? You know what I mean? Because why don't you go on there? I haven't said $10, you know, no, they didn't do none of that. They just showed the pictures and said, do you go in there and testify against him? Because this is, you know what I'm saying, what he did to your friend.
Okay. So it was an emotional thing for you.
Yeah, it was an emotional thing. I had his mother, you know what I'm saying, she called me the day before in California, crying and talking about, please get rid of this guy, he needs to go on the street, he's a monster, this and that and this, you know what I'm saying? So I was still somewhat as a child then, so early teens or whatever, yeah. So I went with that to help her out, you know what I mean? Keep her crying and all that stuff.
Did you ever have a meeting, or did you ever sit down with the prosecutor of this trial and discuss what you were going to say or anything like that?
Mine was on the last minute. They flew me in. I don't know what Mars did. They just flew me in for my testimony. Point the finger. That was it.
Okay.
Who was this?
You didn't have a pre-trial discussion?
Trial discussion. Just it's the man in the court. Just raise a point to him right there. Took me off the stand. It was over there.
That's disgusting.
Whose idea was it for you to say at trial that you knew Christopher Dunn as a friend?
Who idea was at the trial?
Yeah.
No. It wasn't nobody. We didn't know him as a friend. We just knew him. We knew him or knew of him. You know what I mean? And, you know, he wasn't our friend though. He was just a guy in that neighborhood.
Did you make a comment to somebody at one point in this trial process that you knew Christopher Dunn and as a friend?
I don't think so. He was my friend. I don't know what I was saying right there. I was saying stuff, but it didn't want to say it.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Have you ever been offered leniency or expulsion of criminal charges on behalf of your testimony in the Christopher Dunn case? You weren't facing any charges when you went back there to testify or at the like the night or a couple nights, days after Ricky was shot?
I didn't have a criminal history when Ricky was shot.
Okay.
Never been in jail a day in my life.
And when they flew you out to St. Louis years later, did you have any criminal charges or anything?
Right, kitty cats everywhere.
It was nothing I asked them for because I wasn't in jail at the time, so I didn't need that.
Okay. And they didn't offer you any incentive for leniency on the charges that you were facing? Okay, there was no discussion about that? Okay.
How many times do you want to ask him?
Why have you decided to tell the truth about Christopher Dunn and the shooting incident now?
Because I know that we wasn't telling the truth at the time. I know we didn't know. We just mad at Christopher Dunn because he was a crip in our neighborhood, staring up around the basket. We it was really not like now we never put it like that. And we just wanted to get rid of him. I guess with kids, you know what I'm saying? That's the way it went. That's how the story went. And, you know, on the back of my mind, they always hit me with, you know what I'm saying? After I got to jail and seeing people get convicted for murder and all that, it comes back to you like, man, I testified on the man that I don't even know if he did that. You know what I'm saying? So I hear now giving a second chance, you know what I'm saying, to reverse my testimony. So I went with it.
Okay. And so I take it that this has been on your mind for a long time, and you feel that in hindsight it wasn't fair for you to point the finger at Christopher Dunn. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Without actually saying it, do it, you actually first get
What about that bothered you the most? About fingering Christopher Dunn for this? What bothered you the most about that wore on your conscience the most?
Yeah, I got a man, but I don't know. Did he get sentenced for that?
Yeah.
It's life.
Did he get
Yes, he's still
sentenced for that?
in prison.
Since that guy testified on, and from the day that the murder happened.
Yes.
Yeah, I took a man's life away. I didn't even see him do it. I mean, I don't know what I'm saying. You know, I didn't watch since now. I've been married 13 years. I watched Forensic Files. I watched Court. I watched all that, and I see that. You know what I'm saying? It's a mess. You can't. You know what I'm saying? You can't just say that you know what I'm saying. Somebody did something you didn't know and take their whole life away. You know what I'm saying? It's hell in prison. You know what I'm saying?
Doesn't sound like he's very sorry.
I don't know, man. I did that. I never seen him do it. I don't know if he did. You know what I'm saying? And that's it. I didn't see him do it, so I can't say he did. Could have been anybody. That could have been Ricky stepfather trying to get back at him. So that's the most, you know what I'm saying, logical to the thing, you know what I'm saying, it will probably be him. I don't know what I'm saying, we didn't know.
Okay. Was Christopher Dunn at the house or near the house that night of the shooting, of Ricky's shooting? Did you see him that night at all, or the previous day, or as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, you and DeMorris and a couple of others are on the front porch at the home. And when you were out there, and up until the shooting occurred and even after the shooting, Ricky's shooting, did you see Christopher Dunn that night or at any time during those events?
Yeah. No, he couldn't have seen him because he actually has an alibi. He was at his mother's and he has multiple witnesses that testified to that, and still that wasn't enough. So, and the fact that he doesn't even know at this interview with the private investigator that he has put someone in jail for murder for life plus 90 is despicable. Absolutely despicable. Yeah. So there you go. All right. the next one is a witness called Scott Porter. And he is the crime scene reconstructionist. So he's put together a video of the trajectory of the bullets and the crime scene, basically. But it's where is it? 3:15. 3:15. Yes. There we go.
Are you Mr. Roeder? Okay, can you raise your hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. Okay, you may step up here.
This is the last witness for
Just as previous witnesses,
today's hearing.
Speak loudly into the microphone, and if let them finish the whole question before answering, and if there's an objection, let me rule on it before answering. Okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Roeder.
Good afternoon.
Please introduce yourself to the judge.
Scott Roeder.
What is your occupation?
I'm a crime scene reconstruction specialist.
Where do you work?
I own a company called Evidence Room.
And
That's
what
a
does the
good
evidence
business
room
name
do?
for what he
We
does.
create forensic animations, provide crime and shooting scene reconstruction services, expert testimony for criminal and civil cases.
How long have you owned the evidence room?
I opened the Evidence Room in 2002.
And have you worked for the evidence room since 2002?
Yes, I have.
In your work at the evidence room, do you perform crime scene reconstructions and shooting scene reconstructions?
Yes, I do.
How many shooting scene reconstructions have you performed?
Several hundred since I started my company in 2002,
You know, you're very
and
qualified.
several
It's
dozens
the,
prior to that in my prior
it's
employment.
the good stuff.
It will be admitted.
Now on the screen, I'm going to show you
Like it's
Exhibit
free
34.
advertising.
Do you recognize this video?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is the forensic animation that is the companion to my investigation.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of the video you prepared in this case?
I believe it is, yes.
And would it be correct for me to refer to this as a reconstruction?
Yes.
Motion to admit Exhibit 34, Your Honor.
It will be admitted.
What did you do to prepare Exhibit 34?
Well, this is a forensic animation. So after we conducted our report of investigation and reviewed the materials, put together the 3D model, added the physical and forensic evidence as documented in the file, reviewed all witness statements that were available. We put this is the animation that we put together that reflects the opinions reflected in the report and the facts that we believe are verifiable in the file.
Did you have to manually input values into your software to create Exhibit 34?
Yeah, there is some manual work that goes into it. There is some, work that the computer does do, but we do need to input data manually as we receive certain values. Like, for example, the lot size, the street width, the position of the light posts, and that kind of a thing. Those are all manual values that we put in based upon the documents in the file.
After Exhibit 34 was rendered, did you have to manually change any values or manually alter the reconstruction in any way?
Well, we manually tweak the animation. There's certain things that the animation doesn't do perfectly, such as human movement. So we can put a track, for example, for a person, say one, where we start them at position A and then they finish at position B. So we can track that movement, and the animation does, the software does allow for the interpolation of that animation, but we need to tweak sometimes the body motion, the legs, how they move, to make it look organic.
Did you visit the scene to prepare Exhibit 34?
I did not.
Do you typically do scene visits when creating reconstruction videos?
Typically we do, yes.
Do you consider them important usually?
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever possible, where it's valuable, we like to go to the scenes and take our own measurements.
Why are scene visits typically important to do before creating a reconstruction video?
Well, because you want to be as accurate as possible to...
I wonder if watching this video just blows Christopher Dunn's mind, because he's been in prison for so long and technology has evolved so much.
The environment as it exists, as close to the crime scene or the event date as possible. In this particular case, I didn't get the case until 33 years after the incident took place, and the environment is substantially different now than it was 34, 33 years ago. So we primarily relied upon the photographs in the file And then we relied upon Google Earth images and other publicly available images for scale and environment.
Have you been to the scene since preparing your reconstruction?
Yes, I went last night at midnight.
And did that change your opinions in any way?
No, it didn't change it. It confirmed, I think, the accuracy of the model as we have it designed.
You said you used photos from the file and imaging online to render the scene to fit May 18th, 1990.
As close as possible, yes.
What years were you able to see imaging of?
On Google Earth, you have the ability, most recently, you can get a Google Earth image, say, of this area every 6 months now. But when you go back prior to the year 2000, it's usually once a year. And then even then, sometimes it's once every 3 years, depending on the need for, because back in those days, they literally flew an airplane over the area, took a photograph, and then uploaded it onto the internet. We didn't have the exact year. We were able to get 1988, and then there was a gap, and then we were able to get 1992. And that gave us a fairly good idea of the lay of the land that we supplemented with the actual photographs that we reviewed in the file.
At this time, I'm going to play Exhibit 34.
Okay.
He's got the date. Well, I suppose midnight. It would be the 19th. So Rico Rogers is the red cap. Ah, okay. So they found one in the porch railing, like the middle. Yep. That's clever. So that was one shot. I think they said there was at least 3 shots fired. So that was the position, the trajectory of the decedent.
Seems to be a little bit of a lag time in the playback of that video. It's stalling a little bit on the playback, Your Honor.
Gotcha.
Oh. Okay. Graphic warning. Sorry. Didn't see that one coming. I actually put my hand up over the screen physically. Sorry. So there was a bullet lodged in the car as well. So they've accounted for 3. 1 in the porch, 1 in the car, and 1 in Ricky. So this is the testimony from the very first witness that was on the stand. It was Eugene Wilson.
The sections that are playing here on the video, can you explain why they're here?
Sure. These are segments of the record that we relied upon that are what we would call actionable pieces of their testimony.
So this is at Christopher Dunn's mother's house that evening, which is where he was. But he wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to be at a halfway house, apparently. And so when the police came around to see if he was there, because the two defendants had named him, the family lied and said no, he wasn't, because he wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to be somewhere else, but they didn't know that he was being accused of this crime. They've put him there on the floor on the phone because you'll hear later witnesses testifying that they were talking to him on the phone at that time. Well, that was educational.
Is everything after that point in the video references to the transcripts and where you found evidence?
That's right. Yeah, the family of Mr. Dunn had indicated what they were doing that evening, watching the TV show Hunter, Saturday night at 11 o'clock. And that's what I was demonstrating in that last video.
We can pause right here. I'm now going to show you timestamp on Exhibit 34 at 48 seconds. Can you explain what we see here?
Sure. This is after the shots have been fired. The most reasonable position of the shooter at the time he made purchase with the bullet on Mr. Rogers. So this would be the final position of the shooter after the shots were fired and after Mr. Rogers had already been struck by the bullet.
I'm now going to show you timestamp 307. Can you explain what we see here?
Sure. This is a view from the east of the property, looking at the three kids that are on the porch. This would be after the first shot was fired. And I do believe that the first shot did go through that downspout on the gutter that comes along the railing, because that's the most severe angle coming from the neighbor's property, which would also give the shooter the most position of cover for doing some type of a shooting without wanting to be detected, prior to discharging his weapon. And so that's what this view is. And it also demonstrates after the shots fired, if the kids turned and looked, what their view would have been.
What did you use to determine the bullet trajectory in this video?
Well, the bullet trajectory, there's two bullet trajectories in this video that we have verifiable data for. And the first bullet that we can verify its position and also the position of the shooter is the bullet that goes through the downspout of that gutter. And we know that is a fact because the entrance defect on the west side of the gutter is a perfect circle. And the exit on the east side of that gutter is more of a cylindrical. And that's as a result of the bullet going in and then becoming destabilized. And the exit is more of the bullet tumbling and going out long ways rather than through the tip of the bullet. And we know that that happened, and we know where the shooter was when that shot was fired. The second bullet trajectory that we know of is the bullet that struck Mr. Rogers in the back of the head. And we know that because of the autopsy report, and the appearance of the wound on the back of his head is very symmetrical, so that we also know that that bullet did not strike anything prior to hitting his head.
Can we pull Exhibit 34 down? Thank you. Are the bullet trajectories depicted in Exhibit 34 the only possible course that each bullet could have taken?
For the bullets that we have verifiable data for I'm going to call bullet number 1 the one that goes through the downspout on the gunner. I don't believe that there's any alternative scenario that could make that shot happen along the trajectory line. Okay. The other bullet that we have verifiable data for is the bullet that struck Mr. Rogers. Now, that bullet did not have an intervening object before it struck him. But we do know that the house provides a portion of cover, the corner of the house, right? So we know that for that shot to have happened, the shooter is going to need to move from his original position further along the fence line to get a clear shot because Mr. Rogers was taking cover down on the other side. So I think there's a couple of, I mean, I'm not sure exactly how his body would have positioned, but that bullet track, I believe, is accurate. There is evidence by other testimony, it varies a bit, about the number of shots that were fired. It could have, some people say 3, some people heard 5, but that's not uncommon. When people are witnesses to shootings, they get it wrong all the time. It could have been as few as 2. It could have been as many as 5 or 6. But we know the verifiable for the 2. The ones that did not hit anybody or were not documented to have been recovered, we don't know what happened for those because we have no data to string those up.
How would it affect your opinion if there were only 2 shots?
Not at all.
What about 3?
Not at all.
4?
None.
You depicted 5 in your video?
I believe we depicted 5 shots being discharged. Yes.
How would it have changed your opinion if you depicted 6?
None at all, because we have 2 shots that are verifiable, and those are really the only shots that matter. The other shots that could have been fired, up to maybe 6, are just ear witness evidence, and there's no other evidence to corroborate those.
If we could go about 5 seconds in on Exhibit 34. Let me pause here. How do you know how many people are walking west as you depicted here?
Well, we have statements from Eugene Wilson that he was walking with Marvin Tolliver at the time. And based on what I heard earlier today, it reaffirms the record that I relied upon and what we've demonstrated there.
How do you know which order DeMaurice Stepp, Michael Davis, and Rico Rogers were sitting on the porch?
You don't. I think the important part of the actionable testimony that is relevant to the reconstruction is that all 3 of them are on the stoop or on the steps, depending on what terminology you want to use, and that the testimony reflects further that none of them were looking in the direction of the shooter at the time the first shot was fired. And I think that was corroborated today by Mr. Wilson's testimony as well. And then after the first shot was fired, I believe there's testimony saying that they looked back, or that Michael Davis looked back, or that DeMaurice Stepp looked back. But after that particular time, they would have immediately turned and ran away from the bullet, which is what the evidence also shows.
So the turning and running and the looking does not change if the boys are positioned with Rico Rogers in the middle?
It's absolutely irrelevant, the position that they are in on the steps to the reconstruction. It has no bearing on the reconstruction whatsoever, but we needed to give them a starting point. And that was the starting point that we chose, that we felt was accurate to the record.
Generally, is there a type of evidence that you prefer to rely on in forming reconstruction videos?
Oh yeah, it'd be great if we had it all on video every single time. That would make my job a lot easier. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. But we do have to rely upon the documented physical and forensic evidence as it's documented in the file. typically a good crime scene investigator or a crime scene technician or a crime scene photographer will take hundreds and hundreds of photographs for a crime scene, establishing shots, intermediate shots, shots with scale, right? Those are the kind of piece of evidence that we teach. That's what we really want them to get when they're out there on the field. But we don't always get that. But you have to work with what you have and come to a reasonable scientific probability based on the information you have.
What physical evidence did you use to create Exhibit 34?
Well, we have documented evidence, like I said, of the bullet defect entrance and exit on the downspout of the gutter along the railing. We also have evidence of where Mr. Rogers was documented for his, I call it final resting position in the video, but that's not 100% accurate. That's his final documented resting position. He was in a position just prior to that, but then I think he was moved for first aid and so on and so forth. But his actual final resting position would have been where the blood was pooling in the grass. But his first documented final resting position would be as we have it documented there.
What other kinds of evidence besides physical evidence did you use to form Exhibit 34?
Well, we have witness statements from
He's
Mr.
been
Davis,
through
Mr.
that
Sepp, Mr.
before.
Wilson, and,
He's
Mr.
explained
Thompson.
that.
In this case, did you have to primarily
like to
rely
be
on witness
repetitive, don't
statements in
they?
making Exhibit 34?
I wouldn't say primarily, but we wanted to put those statements to a test and to see what the reasonableness of what you can and cannot see, what you could or could not do based on the limitations of the environment and the evidence that we do have.
In your experience, are witness statements typically relied on by experts in your field when creating reconstruction videos?
Well, relied on, I'm not sure if I like that word. I would say we have to use them. We have to utilize the witness statements and put the witness statements to a test of the interrelationship of the evidence. And then it's up to the trier of fact as to the value of that statement based on the totality of the circumstances.
Ah, good
Can I
answer.
show you what has been marked as Exhibit 10? You can flip to tab 10 in your
Tab 10.
binder. Exhibit 10 has been previously admitted.
Okay, I've got it.
What is Exhibit 10?
This is the affidavit of Eugene Wilson.
Do you see about 6 paragraphs down where Eugene Wilson says, we had just been to Chinaman's restaurant and we were sitting there talking and eating our rice?
Is that how the statement starts?
No, that's the end of the
Could you give me the first line of that paragraph?
the night before.
The
That's
night
how
before,
paragraph
yes,
starts.
I see that paragraph, yeah.
Do you see where it says we had just been to Chinaman's restaurant? We were sitting there talking and eating our rice.
Yes.
Why did you put Eugene Wilson walking west instead of sitting on the porch eating rice?
Well, he gives a couple of statements over the years, as do several of the witnesses. And oftentimes in witness statements, they don't nail down the timing of things. And as I learned today, when I was listening to Mr. Wilson's testimony, that seemed to be the case here. He made a reference about eating rice, but that was on a different day. And so I think my instinct was correct to not have him starting off the reconstruction eating rice on the porch. And it's more consistent with the objective evidence that he was walking along the sidewalk because his testimony fits the physical evidence of where the shooter was. And that's consistent with the bullet trajectory, and it's consistent with the totality of the circumstances as we've laid it out.
Is that what you do in a situation where different witnesses have different inconsistent statements?
You have to, yeah. You have to make judgment calls as to not the credibility of a witness, because that's not my job. My job is to look at the actionable statements that the witnesses make and see what is most reasonable based on the evidence that we have.
Let's talk about the lighting in Exhibit 34.
Sure.
Can you explain how you use the software and render lighting in your reconstruction video?
Oh, can I explain how I do it? Sure. In the 3D model, once we have the 3D model, in stock, it would be dimmer.
Oh, tab 4.
We don't want to know how he makes the video. That's
Start
fine.
30 feet out there, and so that main street where the incident took place was extremely dark.
Turning to the photograph on page 7 of Exhibit 40.
Okay.
What does this photo tell you about the crime scene?
Well, now this is a side view, I believe, looking westbound of the neighbor's house. So this would not be the house that the shooting took place. This would be the house to the west of it. And you see the air conditioning unit there. And we can, and the trim there, the green trim and the air conditioning unit is consistent with what we see on the front of that house as well. So we know it's that house. And then so you can see in the back there, in the distance in the background, there's another house that is probably the street that goes north and south. And it might be the back of that house probably. And there's no lights there whatsoever in the backyard or even on that house on the street that it's connected to. So it just shows very, very dark area. Yeah.
When you say that this is the house west of where the shooting occurred, are you referencing 5609 Labadie as in your report on page 3?
Yes. And it would also be, if you look at rotor 000484, that shows you the front of the house with the green trim. And it also shows you the air conditioning unit with the prop on the front of the house. And so we were able to discern based on the trim of the house and based on the similarity of the air conditioning units that that's the back of that house.
So turning to Exhibit 40, page 2, the photo you're referencing is 484.
That's right.
The photo, the house with the green trim you're referring to is 5609 Labadie,
Yes.
and the house with the brick facing wall is 5607 Labadie.
Yes, that's the shooting scene house.
And then turning to page 5 of Exhibit 40. What did this photograph tell you about the shooting?
Well, I mean, this is where Rico Rogers was at his final rest. Now we have two positions documented here. You can see there to the right on the lower right-hand corner, you've got a large blood pooling in the grass, and that is most certainly where Mr. Rogers became fully incapacitated from the bullet, and that's where he would have had no movement. And as a result of that no movement, the blood would be seeping out of his head based on his body position and gravity, and that's why you have that large pool there. That burlap body stand-in chalk mark, whatever you want to call it, is I think where he was at after I think he was turned over or rolled over for vital statistics being checked and so forth. But that's where he was documented in a photograph, and that's why I think they put the chalk line stand-in there.
Do you see a red tap in page 5?
Yeah, there's a red cap just to the north of the burlap body.
How did that go into your Exhibit 34? Your reconstruction?
Well, I mean, most likely, I mean, I don't know if that was the hat that Rico Rogers was wearing, but I mean, that was documented as being part of it. I don't think I have any other photographs of that. And I do believe in the animation, we do show him wearing a red hat. So I made the kind of leap that because that red hat was found very close to where the body was documented, that most likely he was wearing that red hat. And it would make sense if you become incapacitated by a bullet while running northbound and then falling down, that the hat would fall off. Very reasonable. As a former 35-year baseball player, my hat has fallen off many times, and that's about how far it falls off your head when you hit the ground.
I'm now going to show you Exhibit 34 at timestamp 5 minutes and 52 seconds. What does this portion of your video show?
Well, there was testimony from the family that they were at home from 11 to 12 watching a very popular TV show. I know you guys might be a little bit young for this, but I'm 54. I used to watch that show all the time with my family. A show called Hunter. It was a former football player, played cop or FBI guy, and it was a very popular TV show that was on Saturday nights from 11 to 12. I used to watch that show myself with my family. And so when I read that that's what the family had said that they were doing, it was a very reasonable thing for me to say, okay, well, I want to show that, that this is what a reasonable.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to make a judgment on your age, but I think you might be younger than me.
A little bit, not too much.
All right, cross-examination.
All right, Marty, judgment.
You may proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Roeder.
Good afternoon.
So you were hired by the Midwest Innocence Project in this case?
Yes, sir.
And you've been in contact primarily with Christopher Dunn's attorneys?
Yes, I have.
And you are billing about $600 an hour for your time, so you said?
Yes, sir.
How much do you expect to be paid in total?
I've been paid already
Here we
on this
go.
case. I think a
How much
total
you
of
being paid for this?
maybe $7,500, I think, so far.
Now, when you talked to Mr. Dunn's attorneys about working on this case, they told you their version of events,
They did.
and they told you what they were trying to prove.
Yes.
And your primary job, as you said, was just to see if their version of events was plausible with the rest of the evidence.
Well, my primary job is to do a reconstruction. And as part of that reconstruction, we try to test statements to see if they fit the physical and forensic evidence.
And the Innocence Project sent you documents to review.
They did.
The Innocence Project sent you
Yep.
documents to review.
They did.
Every
And
time.
those documents were base stamped with your name.
That's right.
And you reviewed all of them
I did.
and considered them when you're working on your work in this case.
Yes, sir.
All right. So you talked about the minimal physical evidence that was available. Well, is that right? For the record.
Well, I mean, there is documented physical and forensic evidence in this case, and we reviewed on that. I did make a comment that I felt that the file was a bit slim. And I believe I said that in my deposition with you, and I believe I said something to that effect here today, that I would have liked to see more documented evidence.
Yeah. So you have some photographs, and then is that a yes?
Yes.
And besides that, there's a known place where a bullet defect is in the gutter,
Yes, sir.
and there's also the known position of the body,
That's right.
and the body was known to be hit by a bullet.
That's right.
But besides those things, there's not much other physical evidence in the file that you reviewed.
Well, I mean, there's the blood. I think that's critical to place where Mr. Rogers was located. And then, you know, the scene itself is a piece of evidence, right? So building the scene to scale and accurate is, I think, a piece of evidence in of itself, right? The
Sure,
scene
so-
is part of the evidence.
So you used Google Maps and Google Earth to take some measurements of the scene
Yes, we did. We used both of those.
and publicly available information besides that, like Zillow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very good.
And besides Rico Rogers, who is placed there by physical evidence, all the other witnesses in the scene are placed in their spots by witness testimony.
Yes.
And the witness statements you reviewed were in conflict a lot of the time.
There were varying statements that many of the witnesses had, yes.
And where the statements conflicted, you had to decide which ones to show in the animation.
Well, I had to decide which ones were consistent with the totality of the evidence, and those that I find are reasonable based on the evidence, and that's what I showed in the animation, is what I found reasonable based on the evidence.
Thank you. But my question was just you had to decide which ones to show in the animation.
I did, yes.
Now, first of all, let's talk about the Morris step. Tristan, could you just move forward where everybody's sitting on the floor? Thanks. So you chose to put the Morris step there on the second step from the bottom, leaning against the rail.
I agree, yes.
And you animated him looking east away from where the shooter enters.
Yes.
You're aware that when he was first interviewed, the Morris step made statements to the police that he saw the shooter before the shot started?
I don't recall that statement, but if you represent that to be true, I will take your word for it.
Well, let's flip to movements 21, tab
Okay.
21 in your binder. Sorry, it's a small podium here, so I'm fishing around.
I've got it.
All right, so let's start at the bottom of page 5. So Detective Stidham, sorry, are you with me on the bottom
Got
of
it,
page 5?
yep,
Okay.
yes.
Detective Stidham asks, okay, where did you see him at? And Demore Step says, around the corner from next door to the people that live, pig, inaudible. It was a lot. It's a lot right there. He was hiding around the corner. Detective Stidham says, hiding around the corner? Yes. How do you know it was Christopher Dunn? I looked at his face, but you know how you see somebody and you don't see him, Detective Stidham says, uh-huh. Demore Step says, I thought my mind, was playing games, and I looked dead in his face, and I guess he fired. He thought I seen him, so he shot at me first. But, after you're shooting or packing a gun, I guess it moved up, Did I read that right?
You did read it right.
It was hard.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So in this statement, Demore is saying he saw the shooter hiding around a corner before the shooting started. Would you agree?
Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense to me. How do you see somebody who's hiding around the corner? Doesn't make sense.
I'm just asking. That's what he told the police. Isn't that
Right.
And you
He told the
not
police a lot of
animate
things.
him looking towards the shooter before the shooting started.
Right, because it doesn't make sense. It didn't fit
Just
in with
asking
the.
whether you put it in the
Right,
animation or
right.
not.
I had to make decisions on what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And seeing somebody hiding doesn't make sense. It's a contrary statement.
No one's ever been caught hiding.
Well, if
Ever been caught hiding?
I don't think that's what he meant here, but yeah,
I'm just going to ask a series of questions like this. It'll be easier to just tell me whether you put it in the video or not.
I'll do the best I can.
Overall.
So did you animate, as Morris said in his first statement, that he looked west towards where the shooter comes from and saw him before the shooting started?
I did not animate that, no.
Okay, thank you. And then at trial that Morris testified that he saw the shooter before the shots were fired as well.
Yes,
You remember that testimony? You reviewed it.
I do.
And then
And
he
so
identified that shooter.
which testimony would you like him to actually put in his reconstruction? Which one? Which one of the 6 different ones that that he submitted, would you like to take it as the credible one?
Shooter to be Christopher Dunn.
He did.
And at trial,
Yeah.
he testified that he saw the
trial.
shooter in the gangway between the two houses. Do you remember that?
He did, yes.
And do you know what he meant by gangway in context of the scene?
Yeah, we have gangways in Cleveland.
So, did you understand him to mean that
You condescending
area
little
that's there
shit.
that's kind of an alleyway between the two houses?
Yeah, it's like a 3-foot walkway in between the house.
So, based on the statement he made at trial, he looked towards that gangway between the two houses and saw
The
the shooter
judge
there.
looks bored.
That's what he states.
And you didn't animate that in the video.
I did not animate that, no.
Thank you. And then
Yeah,
at Habeas
exactly.
evidentiary hearing, you read that testimony where Morris Stepp testified at that hearing as well.
Yes,
And he again said that he saw the shooter come from the gangway between the two houses. Do you remember that?
I do.
And you didn't animate him coming from the gangway based on that testimony either.
Well, I don't.
Well, it
animate
doesn't really
anybody
matter,
coming from
does it, where he came from? It matters where the shot was fired from. So you can't fire it around corner.
the gangway. I don't have the I have the animation starting just a moment before the first shot.
Right. I mean, eventually the shooter does enter the scene.
The shooter
Oh,
starts in the
obviously.
scene. He's in the scene when we started. He's off
He's
to
over there
the.
behind the house on the far side.
He's in the shadow there, I believe, right underneath the. I mean, you won't see it until we turn the camera, but
You would agree with me the shooter's not animated in the gangway between the two houses.
no.
So just to sum all this up, based on all of Morris Stepp's prior statements, he did look west towards the gangway before the shooting started. Would you agree?
Would I agree that he said that or he did
Oh,
that?
this attorney looks like
I would
he's
agree that
19.
he said that.
And you animated him looking east the other direction.
Yes, he also stated he looked east. Yes, but then yes, I have him starting off
He
looking
stated he looked
east.
east before the shooting started.
No, he did look east at some point, and I have him the starting point with all of the children looking east.
So you're saying, you know, in your mind, the video, he could have looked the other direction at some other point, but you have him looking east now. Is that what you're trying
That's
to say?
right.
Let's talk about Marvin Tolliver's positioning. So you placed Marvin, his name's also Marlon sometimes in the document, do you agree?
I would agree. Yes,
And you don't know which one for sure it is.
I really don't know. I have it listed as Marvin. If it's Marlon, we can just call him Mr. Tolliver if you wish.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, right? I just don't want to be disrespectful to
Sure.
Tolliver wherever he is. You placed him, would you agree with me, near 5607 Labadee walking west.
Yes, I have him walking correctly right there in companion with Mr. Wilson.
And you know that Mr. Tolliver told the police that before the shooting, he was walking east in the 5500 block of Labadee.
He did say that, yes.
So, you know, you have a zoomed out photo of it later though, but if we zoomed out, the 5500 block would be the block that's east of Labadee, or
Yes.
east of the crime scene, would you agree?
It would be to the east of the crime scene, yes.
Right, so he was about a block east, walking east, according to a statement in the police report.
Yes.
And that would be the opposite direction of the way the shooter enters the scene.
Yeah, but again, and I don't want to be argumentative, but we have to talk about when in the sequence people make their statements. It's like the rice thing all over again. It's, you know, it was the day later he was eating rice, or the day before he was eating rice. At some point, he was probably walking east because they were going to Chinaman to get food. It's just where in the sequence he says that as it's related in the record
Sure, well,
that I
we
think
can
needs to be
listen you
clarified.
statement. You wanna- Are you finished? I'm sorry.
Yes, I was just trying to give you a complete answer. That's all.
Thank you. We can look at a statement if you want to flip to petitioner's exhibit, or sorry, Movement's exhibit 36. It's going to be on page.
Oh, he's
AGO,
fighting
page
over
1030.
potato, for goodness sake.
Is it 36?
Yeah, exhibit 36.
Exhibit 36, page 30, I think he said. Right.
Yep, page AGO 00030.
At what point does the direction in which a witness that didn't see anything and can't testify to seeing
All right, so
anything
Mr. Tolliver, you can read
makes
his statement and you let me know if I'm
any
reading it correctly.
difference
So
as to the
Tolliver
innocence or
stated prior
guilt
to the incident, he,
of the
Tino, and
defendant?
Gary D were walking east on Labadee in the 5500 block when suddenly he heard what sounded like 5 gunshots.
Did
At
they
that
have
point, he
shrimp
ran
in
home and
there?
observed the
in
victim
their
lying on the front
Chinese?
lawn and was advised by DeMorris Stepp that Christopher Dunn, aka Trap,
Would
had been
that make a
shooting.
difference?
Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
All right. But you would agree with me that in your animation, Marvin Tolliver is not walking east in the 5500 block of Labadee.
At this moment in time, no, he's not.
All right. Well, in fact, he never walks. He does run east eventually. I don't know if he makes it to the 5500 block, but
He does eventually run east,
All right.
yes.
so, you know, based on his statement to the police, the sequencing is a little more clear, right? He says that he's walking east on Labadee and then shots are fired and then he runs home. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Let's talk about Eugene Wilson's positioning. So you placed him alongside Marvin Tolliver in front of 5607 Labadee walking west, right?
Yes.
So you know that from reading the police reports that the police canvassed the area for witnesses who might have seen something that happened after the shooting.
Yes.
And you're familiar, you know, with the statement that we just read that Mr. Tolliver said that he and Gino were walking east in the 5500 block. Is that right?
You said Gino?
Gino.
That's different. So there would have been 3 people walking back from the Chinaman. Is that what you mean?
I can read the statement again. So Tolliver's statement to the police was, prior to the incident, he, Gino, and Gary D were walking east on Liberty in the 5500 block. So would you agree that based on that statement, Tolliver and Gino and Gary D were all walking east on Liberty?
At some point, but we don't know where in the sequence, how much before the shooting they were doing that. We don't have an exact time code of when they were doing that. And that's part of the problem with the statement is the vagary is not nailed down so that we have actionable data for every individual person.
I'm sorry, I thought we just agreed that the rest of the statement does make the sequencing clear. I'm going to finish the question. On AGO 00030, statement in full, you're reading along with me, as Tolliver stated, prior to the incident, he, Gino, and Gary D were walking east on Labadee in the 5500 block when suddenly he heard what sounded like 5 gunshots. At that point, he ran home and observed the victim lying on the front lawn.
Right.
So if I read that correctly, would you agree with me that Gino, Tolliver, and Gary D, just before the shots were fired, were walking east in the 5500 block?
According to that statement that you just read, that's what that statement would reflect, yes.
All right, thank you. And you didn't animate Eugene Wilson along with that group walking east?
No, I don't have any sworn testimony for that group. I have sworn testimony for Eugene Wilson.
And you remember Mr. Wilson here was earlier, you were in the courtroom, weren't you?
I did. I was back there watching him testify, yes.
And you remember that he agreed that Gino would refer to him. That was his thing.
Yes.
Now, you know that at trial, you would have reviewed the trial testimony to Morris Stepp, and he testified that he, Michael Davis, Enrico Rogers, and the shooter were the only people there when the shooting occurred. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
And at the habeas evidentiary hearing, Stepp testified that the people who had gone to the store didn't see the shooting because they weren't there. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
Did you review Michael Davis's statements to the police as well?
I did, yes.
And you would agree with me that Michael Davis never mentioned seeing Eugene Wilson at the scene of the shooting?
No, he did not. Not from that statement that I listened to earlier, nor from that other record.
Understood. Did he mention Eugene Wilson in his trial testimony? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Would you agree with my representation that he didn't mention Eugene Wilson?
I'll agree with you.
And so Michael Davis, as far as you know, never mentioned that Eugene Wilson was at the scene in any of his statements.
I would agree with you.
You know that, I'm sorry, I'll strike that question. So you know that Eugene Wilson's first statement about this case was an affidavit that he signed in 2016.
Yes.
And 2016 was roughly 26 years after the shooting.
Yeah.
All right. You also know from your review of the record that Mr. Wilson is a close childhood friend of Mr. Dunn.
I learned that today. Yes.
All right. You've been over this a little bit with opposing counsel, but in his affidavit, originally in 2016, Mr. Wilson said he was standing right next to Rico Rogers when Rico was shot. Would you agree with me?
I believe he clarified that today, saying that it was after he was shot, he was standing next to him, like after the shooting had taken place.
He did say something different today. I'll agree with you. But would you agree with me that when you reviewed the record in the affidavit, it said he was standing right next to Mr. Rogers?
I believe that that's what you're representing it to say, but I believe the witness clarified what he actually meant by that. But
we can go.
But I don't want to,
take a
argue
look
with you
at
over
it.
the record. I think I understand what you're saying.
Let's just flip to Exhibit 10 and take a look at what it says.
Sure.
Oh, Lord. Won't you buy me a big diamond ring?
All right. So this statement
This
is on the second
prosecutor's
page
giving
of
me the
Exhibit 10.
spirits.
Here's Exhibit 10.
Because he's just going to
I've got
nitpick.
10 here with me.
All right. So it is the second.
Let's go to this bit.
Where the shooter would enter the scene.
Kristen, could you go to about 106? So as it pans here, you see the street light on the corner. And as the camera pans around, you'll see the street light I'm talking about here across the street. So if you pause there, you animated a light pole kind of right across the street from the house where the shooter enters the scene. Right?
It's a pole. I don't know if there's no light on it, but it is a pole.
You didn't choose to animate that as brightly as the one on the corner. Is that fair?
Well, there was no evidence that there was a light there.
Right, but whatever you placed on that light pole, you didn't choose it to make it as bright as the.
What did I say? It was a light pole? It could just be a pole. It could be a,
Oh, my Lord.
could be a street sign pole.
Oh, somebody stabbed me in the eye.
I placed a pole there.
What do you think it was?
I don't know what it was. I have evidence that there was a pole, but I don't have any evidence that there was a light pole there.
What did you use Google Maps to look at a street view of the scene?
Not Google Maps. I used Google Earth for the years 1988 through 1992.
Would you agree with me that Google Earth only takes top-down photos?
That it does, but it also takes perspective views once you get into the street view. But at the time, it would be just top downs because I think it would just be top down aerial photographs back in the 80s and 90s.
All right, Tristan, can you go ahead to 330? As we move to the back in 330 here, you'll see that you did animate the light in some parts of the scene. So look there. So we pause. You can see that the field in front of the house is being affected by a pretty big cone of light. Would you agree?
This is the rear of the house, I believe.
Well, there's a porch.
Could you play the few seconds before this and a few seconds after so I can get my bearings on what we're looking at?
You can keep going if you don't mind, Jason.
Okay.
There we go. There's a place in 334 where you can see the camera zooming towards the backyard. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Before that, at 330 in kind of still frame, you can see a cone of light illuminating the front yard. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And that's presumably from the street lamp across the street. Is that true?
The one that I've animated consistently throughout, correct.
So it was a light pole.
It was the one that was animated there originally. This is not a second light pole.
It's not a second light
This is the same light pole.
Okay, so there's a light in the foreground of the picture, illuminating the front of the yard that you have. There's also another light all the way down at the corner, illuminating the corner.
That
You agree?
Well, let me explain. The light that we have in the foreground is an artificial light I added into the scene so that we can have some perspective, because we're not doing the crime scene as part of the action of what happened, but we're taking a view of the property to look at where other things were documented on the scene. And so I added that light as part of just an aesthetical aspect so that we can see that we're going around the property. The shooting scene is over. And right now we're just documenting the car in the back of the house.
Doesn't matter
And
where
there's
the
another,
light is.
ambient aesthetic light that I put in the back by the car. Otherwise, if I don't add any light into this area, you don't see anything. So the shooting scene is over, and we're now just simply taking a tour of what other evidence was documented. And this isn't meant to be a point of view anymore, but a tour looking at evidence that was documented, particularly the car in the back of the house.
So to be clear, you're testifying that that light in the foreground is just an artificial light. It's not coming from a street light that you've animated.
At this particular moment in time, the shooting scene reconstruction is over, and we are simply viewing the property and other evidence that was documented. And I added that light for aesthetic value so that we can see that we're turning around the property to go look at the car in the back.
Now, you were here earlier when Mr. Wilson testified.
Mine's bigger than yours. No, it's not.
I know that
Yours
couldn't
is
see
bigger than
from your angle,
mine.
but he
I've
kinda
got at
came
least
up on a
4
larger map and
inches.
marked where the street lights are.
I do recall him interacting with the board, but I couldn't see what he was doing. No.
So if he marked
Yep.
a street light across the street
No, it's
from
not blue, it's
where the shooting
green.
occurs,
What are you
we
talking
confirm that
about,
by
AJ?
looking at the street view on Google Maps.
If we could get the year accurate, yeah, we could probably, yeah.
Sure. We don't have an internet connection on the computer right now. But we could check that out.
You're kidding me.
See if we can get Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we should probably take a break anyway, so why don't we do that for 10 minutes?
Right.
So
All
we'll
right,
resume
so
at 3
they do
o'clock.
take a break here, and they resume at 5:05. And
On the record, and you may proceed, Mr.
We went to 5607 Labadee. We went to Street View, and we went back to the earliest photo we could see, which I believe was from 2011. Is that
Yes, I agree.
right? And
you made him
looking
go
on
out
the
and
screen here,
Google
this is
Earth.
the Street View photo from 2011.
Yes, it is.
And if you rotate the camera across the street from the scene of
He's
the
got to
shooting,
prove that there's a
there is
bloody
an
light
additional
on the
street light there,
pole.
if you agree with me.
Oh my
So in
God.
2011,
Are
there's
you
street
for
lights
real?
across the street from the house next door to the porch where the shooting happened.
Yes.
And you did not animate
Oh,
that
well,
in
that
the
does
animation.
it.
No, I did not.
That's it. He's guilty. There's a light on the pole. He's guilty. That's it. Case closed.
Or light from
Good
it at all.
detective
No.
work.
Okay. So
Mr. Little
just moving on a
PP.
bit to the alibi piece of the animation that you did. Did you have any physical evidence that that alibi animation was based on
Do you have any physical evidence?
that you reviewed in the record?
There was no physical evidence.
No, there
with
was
regard to
5
that, no.
witness statements,
And
though.
you also reviewed Mr. Dunn's original statement to the police in the police report.
Yes.
Mr. Dunn, in the original police
Google
report,
Map. Apparently, earlier on when he was doing the reconstruction, they had Google Maps available in 1988 and in 1992 because they didn't take them as regularly as they do now. So they compared the difference between 88 and 92 to get the value of what the scene would have looked like in 1990. So, but obviously when they went out during the break, and Mr. Little PP decided to get out his Google Maps on his smartphone, they couldn't get back any further than 2011, which then showed a representation that the pole, in fact, had a light on it. Yay for
Would you
you.
agree with me that he said that after 12 a.m. he went to someone named Terry's house?
Yes.
And that's not what you animated in the video, is it?
Well, I think the alibi animation ends at 12.
Sure. So before that, he says that at 10 p.m. he left to ride around with someone named Wilford Rickman.
Yes.
And he doesn't mention being
It
at his
is,
mother's
yes.
house during that time period or talking on the phone.
That's correct.
And then did you also review Martha Dunn's original statement to the police?
Yes.
So the first time the police talked to Martha Dunn, they come by in the early morning hours of the 19th, and she says that he's not home. Is that true?
Yes.
And then she later told the police that Mr. Dunn left his residence, or her residence, I'm sorry, around 11 or 11:30 p.m. on the night of the 18th.
Yeah, because he wasn't supposed to be there at the time.
I don't specifically recall that, but if you're saying that that original statement reflects that.
That's all right. Let's just turn to movements 36.
Well,
And it'll be page AGO 00038. All
this
right,
witness
so
doesn't
you
care. He's
came in
getting
Martha
paid
Dunn's
$600 an hour.
Yeah. Sure, yes.
All right, so let me know if I read this correctly. Martha Dunn stated Christopher D. left their residence at approximately 11 or 11:30 p.m. during the evening of May 18th, 1990. At approximately 2 a.m. of May 19th, 1990, Christopher Dunn returned home and entered the East family room. Did I read that correctly?
You did read it right.
All right, and so that's,
Yay.
you did not choose to animate what happens in that statement. Would you agree with me?
I agree.
All right, that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Green. Ms. Houston, do you have further questions?
Oh, that's okay. No, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, for $600 an hour for sure.
Mr. Roder, there was some discussion about where Michael Davis fell. Does where Michael Davis fell change the shooting portion of the reconstruction at all?
Not at all.
And you have Eugene and Marvin Tolliver walking west.
That's correct.
Did Marvin Tolliver ever make any sworn statements in this case?
He did not.
And under Eugene Wilson's only testimony that you've heard other than the affidavit, so all sworn testimony, where does he say he was?
Where does Eugene Davis say he was?
Eugene Wilson, where does he say he
Eugene
was?
Wilson says he was right where I have him in the animation, in all of his sworn testimony.
Is it unusual in your experience in reconstructions to have conflicting statements from crime scene witnesses?
It's not unusual, no.
So how do you decide which versions to animate in your reconstruction?
We just make the decision based on what is the most consistent with the physical evidence that is documented in the record.
There was also some discussion about the Midwest Innocence Project hiring you and reconstruction being, strike that. There was some discussion about the Midwest Innocence Project hiring you and telling you what to put in a reconstruction. Do you recall that?
I mean, there's some allusions to that, I suppose, but yeah.
Have you, in your experience, ever made a reconstruction that did not fit the attorney strategies or another person who hired you strategy?
Absolutely. Making people happy is not my department. Particularly making lawyers happy is not my department. I am not McDonald's. I do not take orders, or do I take instructions. I do my job to the best of my ability, to my oath of a crime scene reconstructionist, and my only allegiance is to the truth.
Have you ever
Good
had to
answer.
tell someone that you made a reconstruction for that it did not fit?
Yeah, many times.
The Google Earth photo that you looked at with the streetlights a few moments ago,
Hmm.
it was from 2011.
Yes.
When was the crime scene in this?
1990.
And then I'm going to take you to look at Exhibit 40 one more time for me.
Okay.
If I can turn to page 2. Just to clarify, because there was a lot of talk about the two houses again. Can you point out for me 5607, Labadie.
5607. I have my glasses. I gotta look at it. Hold on. I can't really read the address on it. I think 5607 is the where the shooting happened with the porch to the right, and yeah, where you have the red arrow. Correct.
So then the green awning house is 5609.
That would be correct. Yes.
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Susan. Anything further, Mr. Crane? Thank you for your testimony, sir.
Thank
You
you,
can
Your
step down.
I appreciate it.
Sure.
All right. And that there
Okay,
ends
I think
testimony
that concludes everything we're doing today, correct?
for
And we have some
2 days
stuff that
hearing.
The lawyers and
So, what do you reckon? Have you been convinced yet that he is guilty of this crime beyond a reasonable doubt? Or have you been convinced that he is innocent beyond a reasonable doubt? Well, we shall find out tomorrow when we conclude tomorrow's hearing. Yep, that's fine, AJ. So, day 2 of this conviction hearing tomorrow. We are streaming at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Eastern Standard Time. So, pop your notification bells on so you know that we're going live, and we will update you on the completion of this case. And AJ, I will email you the link to the second half of this where it takes off from this point here. Alrighty. So thank you for joining us. Thank you in chat. Thank you on the replay crew. Thank you, kiddies, for sleeping on my mouse pad right now. I've had to move my mouse onto my diary because I have a kitty cat. Hang on. Oh, fast asleep on my mouse pad. So, yes, it is bedtime for me. And you have yourselves a fantastic Tuesday. Hopefully it's nice and warm over there. I'm off to beddy buys. Oh, what's going on there? Hey, hello. StreamYard's doing something funny. Oh, God. Oh, stop. I swear to God, something is playing up today. Hey, all right, I'm going to play the outro and go.
The and Debbie here. Fill your